In the future, when the human world and the game dimension are connected, many kinds of dungeons and monsters appeared on Earth and started to invade the human world. Since then, some humans have experienced changes because of the help of the system, which has awakened them as players, so that in the end they have the strength to fight back against monsters that come from other worlds. Unfortunately, over time, humans begin to be blinded by the system that makes them strong. Gradually, humans became greedy and started stealing resources from the dungeons excessively. Due to human addiction and the tendency to continuously rob dungeon resources, abyss-ranked dungeons appeared, guarded by one devil who had the power to surpass human strength, and that was the immortal king, Lord Adasalai. In order to defeat him, humans invaded the abyss-level dungeon, and they were led by a player named Liu Yi. The two sides attacked each other until there was a huge war involving the two interconnected worlds. Adasalai easily slaughtered every human that came into his dungeon, and there was one spear-wielding player named Liu Yi leading them. Liu Yi attacked Adasalai with his powerful attack. This spear user seemed to have 4 angel wings, and the two of them exchanged attacks with each other. However, Liu Yi, who was previously overbearing, was overwhelmed by the might of Adasalai. Not long after, the legendary spear user was lying helpless after fighting the immortal king. Just as he was about to kill the spear user, a voice came from the top of the cliff saying, "Do you not care about the lives of your people?" Up on the cliff, a treacherous human was using Adasalai's people as hostages to make him surrender. When the immortal king was off guard, Liu Yi directly stabbed Adasalai in the stomach from behind and made him seriously injured. The king was enraged by these humans' cunning behavior, whereas Liu Yi was not at all remorseful of what he was doing. He will do anything to win, uncaring what method he has to resort to in order to get what he wanted. Adasalai did not remain silent. All his strength came out of everybody, and he then shouted, "Die with me!" Adasalai's power exploded, and his body was destroyed instantly, marking the end of his life. It is not known what Liu Yi's fate would be after that incident, but the greatest raid in human history succeeded with the death of the immortal king, Lord Adasalai. Everything seems to have ended, but the story about Adasalai is still not over, which is marked by the sword of the immortal king still burning blue. 10 years later, in Dungeon Burial Area, another party is seen conducting a raid on the dungeon, where they fight the undead army there. One of the female arrow users shouted at her team members, reminding them to listen to her orders and clear this dungeon immediately. But at that moment, a giant wooden block appeared which fell on a player, and the one carrying the wooden block was a suture monster. With one wooden block attack, the monster managed to finish off many players. The previous woman, who seemed to be the captain of the group, cunningly ordered people who actually only came to this dungeon to collect materials to advance as bait. One of them said that fighting the monster was not their job, because they were only low-level players, and it was their first time entering a dungeon. However, their complaints were for naught. They are not able to fight against the strong players, and were forced to do what they wanted, even though they knew that it was very dangerous for their lives. The party leader was pleased to see the baits work, and she intended to do the final attack to get the most XP. Meanwhile, one player who became the bait said that he had to do this for his younger brother named Xiao Xiao, and he had to return home no matter what. He saw the weakness of the suture monster, which of course was right at the seams on its body. But when the player was about to attack him, an arrow pierced his body. Unexpectedly, this fatal blow was the work of the party captain. She deliberately attacked, knowing that the player intended to take the last hit, and viciously blamed the player for blocking her view. The player fell down as he kept thinking about his brother who was at home and needed him. Therefore, he couldn't die. To make matters worse, the suture monster takes this moment to hit his body with a giant wooden block, making everyone think that the player should have died. But not long after that, a very bright blue light suddenly entered his body, making everyone there very surprised by what happened. The young man's heart, which had stopped before then, started to beat again, and he woke up as if he was fine, even though he had been hit really hard by the suture monster. The player said that he didn't expect that his soul repair would take a very long time, and he was reborn to Earth with this weak player's body. The suture monster, who saw that his enemy was still alive, attacked him again. But this time it was different. The player easily slashed and killed the suture monster once again. Unexpectedly, just one strike had allowed him to kill that monster. The man gained 2,000 XP and rose to level 5 at once. Understandably, the captain was confused about what trick the lowly player used to kill the suture monster, which was classified as an elite monster that stood at level 10. The player himself was still confused by the system that had suddenly appeared, but he came to the conclusion that the higher the level, the stronger he is. The system also surprisingly identified him as the boss, and granted him the right to unlock a special authority. While opening the special rights he received, the young man said that he had been waiting for this time. After waiting for 10 years, the day has arrived for his resurrection. It seemed that something that had possessed the young man's body was the immortal king, Lord Adasa Lai, whose soul had returned and entered the weak young man's body. Thus, the raid continued. They were fighting against the undead who could use magic abilities. The main character named Zhou Qing advances by taking his time to kill the magic skull and get 5 conquer points. After unlocking the special privilege which is the boss, it seems that he can't level up from killing monsters, and his level is stuck at level 5. In return, he gets conquest points that can be used to unlock new skills and rights. Currently, there are not enough points, and the skills that are unlocked are just conquering eyes that can see other people's levels or professions. To get additional conquest points, he has to kill monsters. Actually, he wanted to kill all the players here, but he wasn't strong enough yet. When Zhou Qing, whose body was controlled by Ade Salai, used his conquering eyes, he found that the female captain's level was 20, and her name was Andeli Ya. Zhou Qing kindly gave a magic potion to Andeli Ya. At this time, she was confused why her arrow didn't kill this person, while there was one other player who saw a blue flame appear. Seeing that, Zhou Qing immediately knew who was the boss of this dungeon, and from the huge flames, a level 20 bone demon dragon appeared. Andeli Ya ordered all the players to defend their positions, while Zhou Qing instead ran. He chose to retreat from this battle while saying, "Fight for what? If you want to die, then go ahead, but I'm out." Of course, those words made Andeli Ya angry, and planned to kill him after defeating this boss. Meanwhile, the bone demon dragon was spitting out huge flames, but Andeli Ya's group still seemed to be able to withstand it, and started attacking it. As the boss began to open its cores, Zhou Qing finally said that it was almost time for him to appear. The bone dragon's core had already exploded, and the players were delighted by it, and started attacking it once again. But at that time there was a purple flame that burned the warrior player, who was a close-range type, and the ranged players started to attack him again. However, the attack didn't hit him as if something was blocking him. This was the time when Zhou Qing began to appear and charge forward. Seeing that, Andeli Ya said that Zhou Qing is advancing toward his death, when in reality, Zhou Qing calmly won with just one strike. The bone dragon has 2 stages when attacking. First, it will spit fire in the form of a buff, which will continue to increase during the fighting process. And the second stage begins when its core emits another type of fire, which will immediately explode the previous buff. During the first stage, they have to stay away from the fire buff and wait until the second stage comes where the cores open so they can kill him. Zhou Qing jumped up and stabbed the bone demon dragon's core. He said he had killed this monster when he was young, but he didn't expect that this low-level monster would actually become a dungeon boss. From defeating the bone dragon, he gains 100 conquest points, and at the end a new skill is unlocked, giving him access to new dungeon-binding privileges. When Zhou Qing pressed yes, after that a screen appeared with many skills and items in it. He was very happy after obtaining the dungeon-binding rights, but at the same time 2 fireballs directly attacked him and exploded. It was the work of Andeli Ya's group. She said that since the boss had been defeated, the time has come to open the hidden dungeon. The players who followed immediately killed every other player to open the hidden dungeon, and the condition for opening the hidden dungeon was that they had to make sacrifices. Zhou Qing, who had not died from the previous attack, swiftly charged forward and slaughtered all the players on Andeli Ya's side. It was then that Zhou Qing realized that he could get XP from killing players, explaining the reason why he didn't get XP, and instead got conquest points when he killed monsters. Because he was already considered a boss after unlocking the special privileges, killing players was the only way for him to get XP. And Andeli Ya was confused as to why Zhou Qing was still alive. She used an analysis skill and saw that Zhou Qing was still level 5 and a warrior class. She ordered her men to kill Zhou Qing immediately, and one level 10 player came forward to attack. Just then, Zhou Qing used lightning magic to stop him and quickly slashed his shoulder. The player didn't give up. He attacked with his huge axe, but Zhou Qing was able to block the attack with just his hands. Zhou Qing then stabbed the player to death with his sword and earned 1000 XP. They were confused as to why a warrior could use magic, thinking that he might be a magic warrior. Zhou Qing said, "Feel this fear and despair, because I will unlock more skills with more XP from you guys." And Dali Ya with her troops started counterattacking Zhou Qing, thinking that they could defeat Zhou Qing in numbers. Meanwhile, Zhou Qing was calm, because after bonding with the dungeon, he gained passive buffs from sword, knife, magic, strength, and Undying Race's domination, and he could learn the unique abilities of monsters with conquest points. It was explained that Zhou Qing had used 200 points for dungeon bondage, 50 points for the lightning curse skill, and now there were another 50 points left. Zhou Qing found one skill with 50 points, and it was a monster summoning skill. With this skill, Zhou Qing managed to summon many monsters from the dungeon with the skill he had just learned. Even though this skill is very overpowered, it has a long cooldown and can only be used when in bounded dungeons. And Dali Ya was shocked. Why must that trash have such terrible power? But then she let out a whistle that she said she would use against a boss in a hidden dungeon. And Dali Ya had already blown the whistle, and from the forest, animals appeared and fight against the summoned monsters. She said it's the King of Beasts' whistle that can summon animals level 15 and above, but it can only be used once. Seeing his monsters fighting the beasts, Zhou Qing said, "You think I can only control weak monsters?" From above, a huge shadow appeared, and there was a burst of blue flames which completely burned down the beasts Andali Ya had summoned. And then Zhou Qing said with intense intimidation, "You have underestimated me!" Immediately afterward, a bone demon dragon appeared from behind. And Dali Ya was very surprised because it turned out that Zhou Qing could control the boss. She started talking about Zhou Qing, who would die if he killed her now. It was said that she had come here under the orders of the Blood Race clan chief, who was level 40, and destroying Zhou Qing was like killing ants to him. Zhou Qing said he didn't care about his status, because if that person got in his way, then he would just have to kill him. And Dali Ya still kept saying that there would be someone far stronger than Zhou Qing, not to mention that her clans were the ones who participated in Lord Liu Yi's assassination. Zhou Qing said that Dali Ya was quite good at pissing people off, and he then ordered the Bone Demon Dragon to kill her immediately. With a single burst of fire, Dali Ya was quickly burnt to ashes. That way Zhou Qing gained 5000 XP and leveled up to level 10. The system also healed his wounds quickly afterward. But not long after that, there was suddenly a great vibration, and there was a warning stating that the player's sacrifice had reached the requirement, and the hidden dungeon would be opened. After that, a large gate appears that will lead him to a hidden dungeon. According to what Andali Ya said, there was one rare item inside this dungeon. But even when the system gave a warning that the dungeon was extremely dangerous, Zhou Qing admittedly said that it seemed like the system didn't know what the real danger was. Smirking, he said, "I was the most dangerous being, and all the items in this dungeon belong to me." Thus, Zhou Qing decided to enter the hidden dungeon. Before entering, Zhou Qing realized that the items he used were very weak. Then he saw the items belonging to Dali Ya's group, so he told his monsters to take them all and put them in the inventory. He only uses the items he needs, and the items he uses cannot be seen by other people, so he doesn't need to be afraid of being suspected of killing them. Zhou Qing had entered the dungeon, and inside he was quite familiar with this dungeon. Once this dungeon was also his territory, but was changed to a dungeon suddenly by a mysterious power, and then his side was attacked by humans. He guessed what really happened, whether the monster came from his world. On the other hand, monster summoning skills couldn't be used in this hidden dungeon. He entered until he saw a large gate guarded by 2 large statues with a level of 40. But at that moment, strangely, the 2 guards bent down and opened the door. Zhou Qing was confused again. Is there a trap inside? There is no fear that Zhou Qing went straight inside. From above appeared monsters of the Undying Race who ambushed him. Seeing that made him happy, because he specialized in killing the Undying Race, because he had a passive skill that increased his damage against the Undying Race quickly and imperceptibly. He instantly slashed all of his enemies, dodged a single laser from several monsters, and used the Lightning Curse skill. Zhou Qing gained conquest points while defeating those monsters. And after that, he had somehow arrived at a level 40 demon scene. The demon had long white hair. He was very angry because a human had broken the seal his master had made. Zhou Qing, without waiting for a long time, directly attacked the demon with fireballs, which, of course, it didn't work. He wanted to see how big the difference would be now against a level 40 demon. The demon walked quietly, as if the attack from Zhou Qing just now wasn't an attack. He immediately advanced swiftly, and in the blink of an eye had arrived in front of Zhou Qing, to then use his strength to change his right hand, and directly landed a heavy punch on Zhou Qing's body, and sent him flying far away. Zhou Qing immediately knew that he was not strong enough to face a level 40 demon. The demon again forged forward, and this time he used his left hand to stab his body. He could only accept it and lay weak. The demon said that it had been a long time since he drank human blood, and after his blood was sucked, the demon immediately backed away and knew who the person he was fighting was. Zhou Qing smiled and said, "After drinking my blood, you should already know who I am." The demon said yes, and greeted him as Lord Adasalai. He immediately embraced his master happily, and Zhou Qing remembered his past. This demon always follows him wherever, even when he takes a bath. This demon is always there, so he makes a bet to that demon. He will seal it for 100 years, and when it's time he will release it and marry her right away. Meanwhile, the reason why the stone guard in front had let him through because this place was actually Zhou Qing's creation. Zhou Qing then pushed him away and he asked, "Do you know what I'm here for?" The demon already knows. He will avenge the humans who killed his master first. This demon is really hard to handle. He is very clingy, and worships Adasalai very excessively. At that time, the system announced that he was infected with poison from the blood race, and managed to open the blood race boss branch. Even though infected, he is still happy, because even though it is still weak, it is at least stronger compared to the human race. He had gotten stronger due to the passive skill effect of vampire. Zhou Qing asked, "Do you have tier 1 equipment here?" After thinking the demon took something, he took a dowry that he would give when freed that was made by the vampire founder himself. Zhou Qing was speechless with this vampire trait. It was a blood demon suit item that could be upgraded, and there was also an invisible skill in the dark. The vampire was confused, even though the item was nothing special and was just plain clothes. Perhaps it was because now that a player could see the attributes and abilities of one item, Zhou Qing immediately used it. He was very happy after obtaining an epic grade item that was completely different from the previous item, and also he obtained a level 40 subordinate. Zhou Qing, or who was now Demon King Adesala, immediately put on his mask, and it was time to leave the dungeon and tour the human world with him. The demon wanted to be taken out, but he couldn't get out of that place, because Zhou Qing apparently had forgotten that he had also made a barrier so that the vampire couldn't get out of this place. The key to open it was in his weapon, but he didn't know where the weapon was now. Zhou Qing said he would open it sometime in the future. The vampire instead was happy to see his master's evil looking back, and would wait for him anytime. Zhou Qing, who had just come out of the hidden dungeon, was greeted by monsters. Zhou Qing had been training them there for the past 2 days. Before that, he checked why the previous humans called him warrior. It turns out he also has a special class of player, so he doesn't gain skill points by leveling up, but he can unlock skills. Zhou Qing would use this skill to hide the fact that he was actually the immortal king Lord Adasalai. He also changed his clothes back, and he was only 1 step away from the dungeon and headed to the human world. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, there were a lot of people starting from journalists. There were also people in neat suits, and several other players, and there were also 3 people, 1 small child sitting on the robot, and 2 other people. One person was annoyed because this dungeon had a level requirement to be able to enter, and if there wasn't one, he would enter himself and collect the items. The little boy said that someone was going to come out, and the one who came out was Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing whispered into the system to close the dungeon, as if it had already been conquered. The reporters started to get excited because only 1 player came out. This big man was angry because not a single person made it out. He asked Zhou Qing what was going on inside, and Zhou Qing had already explained it. At first the hunt was smooth, but I don't know. Under whose orders did the captain lead a group of people to kill all the users there? Because he was hiding, Zhou Qing was the only survivor, and that was the reason. A big man called Luo Cheng was angry and asked whether the item existed or not. And Zhou Qing asked back, "What item was inside? Or could it be that you were the one who ordered that captain to slaughter other players?" Hearing that, he became very angry and wanted to throw a fist at Zhou Qing, but he was stopped by a small child riding on a robot. It turned out that the little boy was the guild leader of Stockton of the Fresh Blood. He asked Luo Cheng to leave immediately. On the way back, the two talked that they also had to maintain their image. Moreover, there was the GM of the player association there. Stockton would not let Zhou Qing go, but first investigate that person's background. He also said that if you want to finish him off, do it cleanly. And from this, Zhou Qing immediately knew that it was this Stockton who was the mastermind behind the trouble this time. He was sure that one day, this person would definitely repay him. At that time, the GM of the association came to Zhou Qing, and he said that Zhou Qing left the dungeon and he wanted to test his level again, and had to re-register the information. The GM himself was called Lao Jiang, and his level was 46, or it could be said to be stronger than people from the guild blood race. Zhou Qing's status was still the same. He was level 10 and a warrior. This GM was shocked that even if Zhou Qing directly raised 5 levels, but there's no way you could survive the dungeon burial area. Zhou Qing jokingly said that he not only survived but also massacred everyone inside. The GM responded with a laugh. And while it was true that GMs were only responsible for operations and management, their association was not responsible for player killings that occurred within dungeons. After that, the GM gave the player ID card to Zhou Qing, who was currently promoted to level 10. If you want to participate directly in the association, Zhou Qing started walking again, and in his heart he said that he would fulfill the last wish of the owner of Zhou Qing's body previously. Based on the memories of the body he was currently in, Zhou Qing had a younger sister named Zhou Xiao, both of whom had been abandoned by their families when they were young, and they were both dependent on each other. Ade Salai was a grateful person, and now he considered little Zhou Qing as his little brother too, and Ade Salai would protect him. He had arrived in front of his house and heard the screams of a small child. Inside, he saw Xiao begging to wait for his brother to come home, but these loan sharks didn't want to wait. Even though they were able to get out of the dungeon, Zhou Qing definitely couldn't repay his debt. They kicked Xiao out because this house was to be used to cover their debt. The moment Zhou Qing walked in, he counted how many people were there. This person said he would respect the player who was already a player, and could leave this house on good terms, and he also asked what Zhou Qing was calculating. I calculated how much XP I would get. And after that, it was seen that Zhou Qing had beaten up several people in his house. The smart people in making decisions in the group immediately prostrated themselves, apologizing for scaring his younger brother. Zhou Qing asked Xiao Xiao whether it was necessary to kill them. Xiao Xiao said there was no need, because it was a bad deed. Zhou Qing asked the man if he knew about the black market. Of course he knew and was used to places like that. Zhou Qing took out all the items he got. He told him to sell them directly to the black market. That person kept on asking, so Zhou Qing said, "Don't ask too many questions, and do my orders or you will die." Zhou Qing said he would not beat him up. He could use the money to pay off the debt directly. The man said the money from the sale would be left over, and he would give it to Zhou Qing. He also said that if you sell goods like this, leave it to him. He will only ask for a 5% commission from the sale. Zhao Qing also said not to say this item was from Zhou Qing because it would jeopardize his identity. And after that, the man and company left. In this situation, Xiao lightly hit Zhou Qing's hand. He asked why his brother took so long to come home and scared him. Zhou Qing apologized and promised to protect Xiao. Zhou Qing had not felt the warmth of his family in many years, and wondered if any of the Adasalai family were still alive. After that, Zhou Qing came out of his room and changed into a blood demon outfit. It was time to carry out my plan. Zhou Qing had already moved to the city park. He believed that if the plan was successful, he would become stronger. He used his skills that could open the dungeon gates he was bound to, and as a resource for players, this dungeon could entice players to give it a try. Monsters in the dungeon can level up if they kill players, and at the same time the XP also goes to Zhou Qing, so Zhou Qing can AFK and level up. Also, before opening it, Zhou Qing added the rule that only level 5 to level 20 could enter, and they had a chance of awakening. The moment an association car comes, they will seal off this area immediately. Zhou Qing said that he should leave immediately and make breakfast for Xiao Xiao. He is quite confident in his ability to cook, but in fact, his cooking skills are poor. Xiao Xiao was confused because before becoming a player, his brother was good at cooking. But not long after that came the man who was previously ordered by Zhou Qing to sell his raid items, and he said he had sold all the items and gave Zhou Qing a debit card containing 2 million in cash. Xiao Xiao is happy that they have become rich, while Zhou Qing says he wants to entrust one more thing to him. He says that he is going to the dungeon, You take care of Xiao Xiao for a while." The man became excited, because he had already convinced himself to become a servant of the Zhou family. Before Zhou Qing left, Xiao hugged him, asking him not to go. But Zhou Qing said that he had important business and had to leave immediately. After calming down, Xiao Zhou Qing left the house. A few moments later, in the player lobby of the Eastern Association, Zhou Qing was seen sitting limply. He couldn't believe that no player wanted to work with him. The reason was because his level was too low, or he needed a magician and healing class, or also needed a sexy woman to be accepted into the team. At that time, a player came who offered whether Zhou Qing would join his team. It seemed that the team consisted of 5 people with 3 men and 2 women. Zhou Qing was happy and accepted the offer with tears in his eyes because he was very moved that someone had offered him to join the team. Meanwhile, on the second floor, there were Luo Cheng and Stockton, who said that the team was of course their people. They had planned to kill Zhou Qing and take the item they were after. Luo Cheng said the dungeon burial area has been refreshed and the Blood Guild people have gone there to get the items. Zhou Qing, who was in the car heading to the dungeon, said there was something strange about this person wearing a large armor. Why did he return to a low-level dungeon? And he suspected that that person was a spy in their team. After a while, they arrived at the front of the dungeon, and the name of the dungeon was Lizard Man Lake, with the condition of being level 10 to 25. Seeing that name, Zhou Qing finally knew the purpose of that person coming here must be for that thing. They had entered the dungeon Lizard Man Lake. One woman who played the role of healer asked Zhou Qing to protect her in case of danger. Zhou Qing in his heart said, "I have no obligation to protect you, and he should be lucky that he didn't kill him this time." While on the way, 2 fish monsters carrying spears appeared. The woman asked to be protected, but Zhou Qing instead went to the other side where there were few lizard men. The witch protected the healer, and other players had also killed the lizard man. But another lizard man charged, and 2 other monsters were killed using his human skill. War cry. The 2 lizard men stopped moving, and just as they were about to finish, from behind them, a fire magic attacked. The witch reasoned that her hands were slippery and apologized. Zhou Qing could only restrain her emotions and advised her to be careful. Zhou Qing had already started to think about what the possibilities would be. He was sure these people had probably been sent to kill him. After that, the hunt was in full swing, and they had arrived at the boss room. They thought it was the boss's room, but to Zhou Qing it didn't seem like it was the boss's room. It was as if there was the sea, and there was a shipwreck. They were prepared for any monsters to appear. Not to the monsters they got ready when the order came to attack. Everyone started attacking Zhou Qing, except for the person in Japanese armor, and the healer couldn't move because there was earth magic on his leg. He withstood the first attack, but had to take a second, which sent him flying towards the ship. The healer asked what they were doing. Warrior said, "Keep quiet if you don't want to die too." Zhou Qing, who was on the ship, was still healthy and fine despite receiving injuries. At that time, there was a huge whirlpool, and a giant catfish appeared. The monster looked at Zhou Qing, who was still floating in the water. Zhou Qing had seen what these people were doing and could ascertain their goals. At that time, he had been eaten by a catfish monster. The 3 of them were sure that Zhou Qing would definitely die. But suddenly he appeared on top of a catfish monster. "You guys targeted the wrong person, now it's my turn." Meanwhile, at the Blood Guild, Stockton asked. Whether or not that assassin could be relied upon, Luo Cheng was sure that he could be relied on and would definitely be able to finish Zhou Qing since he himself was even afraid of them. Back to Zhou Qing, who had killed the catfish boss using fire magic. The 3 people who had attacked him had already surrounded him again. The healer was confused as to why Zhou Qing could use magic. Even though he was a warrior, a large man started to attack Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing quickly shot a powerful fire magic at the witch, and it hit her. At that time, the big man was already in front of him, quickly attacked him with a lightning curse. He crushed one of the big man's hands, but strangely the big man wasn't paralyzed and attacked him again. Zhou Qing still endured it, and directly separated the person's body. At that time, Zhou Qing used his lightning skill again to attack the warriors who were advancing on him. The warrior was also the same. He did not stop moving, but immediately caught Zhou Qing and the previous witch who was not dead. They no longer cared about Zhou Qing's life. The magician used self-detonation magic, causing a violent explosion. There, Zhou Qing was still alive. because he still had an ace card that could save him from self-destruction just now because of the Bloody Moon item, which added his resistance to all attributes by 100. The healer came to Zhou Qing while giving him healing magic, but after that, Zhou Qing, his body stiffened, and he took his sword and pointed it at his neck. Zhou Qing finally knew that this was the control ability of the healer. The healer could control people and controlled the 3 people earlier to kill Zhou Qing and become an innocent person. On the side, there is a samurai who can also be used as a witness. Just as Zhou Qing was about to cut his own throat, he shouted at the samurai, "How much longer do you want to see this show? I know why you came here to get that weapon. Without my clue, you wouldn't be able to find it." Hearing that statement, Samurai immediately took out his katana and slashed the healer's body to death. The samurai didn't cooperate to kill him. He was out of control. She asked, "Do you know where the item was?" Zhou Qing didn't want to talk to someone who didn't show his true face. It turns out that armor can disguise appearances and also hide levels. The person confirmed it because it was an epic item. He took off his armor and appeared a beautiful woman named Miyamoto. She was level 80 swordsman profession. He said, "Don't fool me, or you will end up worse than him. If you don't believe me, just leave me, and you'll never get the item." Miyamoto sheathed his katana and asked Zhou Qing if he knew what kind of item Miyamoto wanted, namely a sword called Twin Evil Blades. Only Zhou Qing knew where it was, and Miyamoto was pleased to hear the answer, because it was exactly what he was looking for. Zhou Qing asked that the item must be expensive if it was sold, but Miyamoto searched that it wasn't for sale. The item was the key to his profession awakening. Zhou Qing did not know about profession awakening because he used to be a demon lord. So players will get a profession mission when they reach level 20 of profession awakening, while that player has already increased to level 80 and then upgraded his profession again. The conditions are very difficult, and this is something that everyone really dreams of. Currently, there are 7 awakened players who are called the 7 Great Heroes. They are top-class players, and currently it seems the 4 are the same as in the subjugation of the immortal demon king Adesalai, Miyamoto, just 1 step away from that awakening. Zhou Qing told him to follow him, and they immediately dived into the water, followed by Miyamoto. The 2 of them had dived until they found a cave, and when they surfaced there was a land full of treasure. Miyamoto hurriedly asked where the item was, and Zhou Qing immediately searched the pile of treasure and had found a black package for him to hand over to Miyamoto. He said it was a wanted sword, which was actually hidden behind a black cloth. Miyamoto had opened the black package, and upon seeing it, Zhou Qing said he had forgotten one thing. Miyamoto had seen the true form of the Twin Evil Blades, but after that, his eyes looked blank. He was ready after feeling that someone else was the gatekeeper who was still alive here. From across appeared a bigger lizard man carrying his gun. He was a level 40 Lizardman County's king. Zhou Qing was surprised that his level was higher, and that he might not be able to fight him, so he asked Miyamoto to fight him, but Miyamoto seemed to just keep quiet. It turns out that Twin Evil Edge has an illusion effect, and to be able to control the sword, he must be able to destroy the illusion, and Miyamoto is in the process, and can't move for a while. Zhou Qing, who already knew Miyamoto, owed him a favor, so he could use Miyamoto in the future, and bought time until Miyamoto was released from the illusion. Zhou Qing's first attack didn't break through the fishman's defense. He used the soul lockhook technique, and a large hand appeared ready to pounce on him, but with 1 slash he managed to block Zhou Qing's technique. The Fishman King didn't wait long. He quickly ran with incredible speed, and he luckily managed to dodge that one attack, but was again confronted by the Fishman King's fists. Zhou Qing used his skill in time to get away from that huge fist. His level was still low, and his current strength couldn't break through his enemy's defense, so Zhou Qing wanted to use his strongest technique. Zhou Qing gave off a powerful aura, and saw that the Fishman King did not remain silent. He also shot a water cannon at Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing raised his hand to then use the Skillbone Dragon Flame with strong blue flames against the Fishman King's water cannon. The flames won, and hit the Fishman King deeply. He had used his strongest technique. He wished his enemy was dead, but in reality the monster appeared again, and there was a water cannon that directly penetrated Zhou Qing's stomach. The Fishman King was happy to see his enemy being hit by the heavy blow. Zhou Qing was lying down. He was very careless with the level difference that was still far away, and whether this would be the death of the 2. Then shown Zhou Qing's bound dungeon. Not a single party had encountered the Bone Dragon. When he was about to attack, it turned out that the Bone Dragon was already in the 2nd stage, and the previous buff fire immediately burned the warriors who were there. He was waiting for his death to see the Fishman King, who wanted to finish him off. But at that time, there was a notification that he gained a lot of XP from killing players. Zhou Qing had already leveled 15, and his body was healed. Thanks to that, Zhou Qing could withstand the attack from the Fishman King. And let's start the second round. Apparently, Zhou Qing's dungeon burial area, if a player dies in it, the XP will go to Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing dashed towards the top of the fishman's body, made several other attacks from above. He also dived in with a very powerful slash. But the monster's HP was high and its defense was very strong. At that moment, the Fishman King went into a rage mode until all of his attributes were doubled. The Fishman King's rapid attack only left Zhou Qing speechless. But fortunately at that time, Miyamoto was aware, and he very quickly cut him down by destroying the fishman's weapon while at the same time making the fishman's blood low. Miyamoto ordered Zhou Qing to kill him. Miyamoto was confused as to why Zhou Qing was protecting him, even though he could have left him and immediately killed the Fishman King. Thanks to that, he got 1,000 conquest points and also unlocked the beginner-level Demon King challenge mission. Zhou Qing also obtained historical grade materials, and the Demon King's challenge mission, one mission, will move to the challenge room and complete one mission. Zhou Qing was curious what it was, but he would check it out later after exiting the dungeon. Miyamoto himself was still looking at him and acting oddly towards Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing seemed to have taken all the treasures there and wanted to sell them, after which they had already headed for the dungeon exit. Miyamoto gave Zhou Qing a special badge. If you need help coming to the Miyamoto residence, with that badge, no one will dare to stop him. Before leaving, Miyamoto again used his disguise item and asked Zhou Qing to keep his identity secret. After leaving the dungeon, there was one person from the Blood Guild. He didn't expect Zhou Qing to make it out alive. Zhou Qing approached him and threatened that person. "Pass on this message, I will find you guys." This person was so scared after feeling the killing aura from Zhou Qing, he even prostrated himself in fear. Meanwhile, in the Blood Temple, Zhou Qing's assassination plan in the dungeon had failed. At that time, there was a call that also informed that Zhou Qing was still alive. That person even advised the guildmaster not to provoke Zhou Qing. This person also resigned from the guild. Stockton was angry and killed his men who were there, as well as gave the order to kidnap Zhou Qing's sister, because he himself was going to kill him. On the way home, he already knew that Stockton would not let him this time. When he arrived at his house, he was very surprised because his house had been destroyed. He also saw the man he had previously ordered to look after Xiao had been beaten up by several people there. Zhou Qing asks where Xiao is, and the man apologizes for not being able to protect her, and he was taken away by the people who were there. One person there arrogantly told Zhou Qing to come with them, making Zhou Qing say, "I don't need too many people to tell the way quickly." Zhou Qing separated the two heads over there. "I only need one person. Just wait here or I will kill you." The man apologized because he was too weak to protect Xiao. Zhou Qing forgave him. He knew the man was loyal and could be a good subordinate. Meanwhile, at the construction site where many people were already waiting for something, at that moment, an object flew and it turned out to be their battered man. Zhou Qing walked calmly over to the crowd. He asked where his sister was. The people here looked down on Zhou Qing, who had come alone. Zhou Qing told them that they had gone too far, and that I don't negotiate with people like you. Thanks to this person's words, he said that this place can't be supervised by the association, so Zhou Qing can get XP without worrying about anything. Everyone immediately rushed forward to kill Zhou Qing, but Zhou Qing easily took down one by one the people there. He also used fire skills against 2 people. Then he easily slaughtered the 3 people that came. Meanwhile, on top of the building could be seen Stockton and Luo Cheng. Luo Cheng was confused as to what profession Zhou Qing really was. Why could he also use magic? Stockton said, "Take it easy. Zhou Qing can only draw against Luo Cheng. Moreover, they have Xiao as a hostage." Zhao Qing looked over there and glared at them angrily. Zhao Qing was very angry and she said, "Give my sister back." Luo Cheng was ready with his body transformation. He continued to taunt Zhou Qing, and Luo Cheng went down after transforming into a wolf-like beast. "Don't waste time. You all will die today." Luo Cheng advanced, clawed Zhou Qing with a skill, but Zhou Qing's skill managed to block the claw. Luo Cheng didn't realize that he was, "It's very weak. It seems like I don't need to use weapons," so Zhou Qing said. So Zhou Qing attacked using electricity, but Luo Cheng managed to block it thanks to the passive skill that can increase resistance to magic. The two of them exchanged blows. Luo Cheng finally realized that he had been suppressed by Zhou Qing. The first punch had already reached his face. Seeing Zhou Qing's look of contempt for him made Luo Cheng so angry. Even so, Zhou Qing dodged blow after blow. With that, Luo Cheng increased his strength speed and also gained a primitive body, which meant that his body became bigger. He had already attacked and arrived behind Zhou Qing. By that time, Zhou Qing's hand had already caught him. Your luck was running out and you were too weak. Zhou Qing mercilessly removed Luo Cheng's head from his body. Zhou Qing used a vampire skill that could increase his strength several times. He looked up and saw Stockton. Now it's your turn. Stockton cruelly put Xiao Xiao into the robot's body, which he said needed resources from humans. Zhou Qing was very angry when he saw his sister who was being held hostage, and the robot immediately went down to attack. He could withstand a sudden attack from the robot, and Stockton wondered who would die first, Zhou Qing or his younger brother. He couldn't use strong spells to attack this robot because of Xiao Xiao in it. Zhou Qing was pressured by using physical attacks alone, and he couldn't defeat the robot. Seeing Zhou Qing's expression, Stockton threatened him. Decide now, your sister's life will reach the limit, and she will die soon. The robot returns to increase its strength. Zhou Qing was still silent when he realized that the robot was already in front of him. Suddenly the robot fell apart and Xiao Xiao came out of it. Stockton was shocked. How could the robot be destroyed so easily? He also looked around. He also saw that it was all Miyamoto's doing, he wondered. Why this person is here? Zhou Qing was very happy that Miyamoto was not late. Miyamoto said, "Don't worry that the attack just now didn't hurt your sister." He also asked if you need help killing that boy. "No need, I will take care of it myself, so please take care of my sister." Zhou Qing wanted to kill this boy with his own hands, while Miyamoto had already left with Xiao Xiao and was going to protect Zhou Qing's sister. When it was finished, just come to Miyamoto's residence. Stockton mocked Zhou Qing for wasting Miyamoto's opportunity. He took out his dagger and immediately attacked Zhou Qing. The two slashed and parried each other until Stockton used the skill Dark Shadow Assault. A black bat appeared that attacked Zhou Qing. He knew that this was the Blood Clan profession, and at that time Stockton's powerful slash had already hit Zhou Qing. But at that moment, there was a blue flame that burned half of Stockton's body. The fire attribute caused a lot of damage to the Blood Clan. Stockton said that Zhou Qing underestimated him. He increased his strength and was about to counterattack just now. It can be seen that he had advanced using the Vampire Race Engrave skill. That attack succeeded in making Zhou Qing pressed against the wall without being able to move. Stockton immediately took out a lot of blood from Zhou Qing's body to be absorbed. But at that moment Zhou Qing's body suddenly disappeared. Stockton looked for Zhou Qing's whereabouts. Why did he suddenly disappear? Even he couldn't detect it. It turned out that Zhou Qing deliberately carried out the Demon King's mission, so that he immediately moved to the Demon King's challenge room. Or one could say that it was his attempt to escape. But on the one hand, the mission had already started, so Zhou Qing would try his best to complete the Demon King's challenge and going back to kill Stockton. At this time, Zhou Qing was already in the Demon King's challenge dimension. That place had a door and a circular floor with several pillars encircling it. There was a magic circle that activated. From the magic circle, a fallen apostle monster appeared, and his only task was to defeat that monster. The fallen apostle is in the form of a giant human and has 2 horns. Saw his opponent, the fallen apostle launched straight away to attack Zhou Qing. His huge axe collided with Zhou Qing's sword. After that, Zhou Qing lost his strength. He dodged the attack and headed straight for the back of the body. Saying that this monster was too weak, Zhou Qing's powerful slash managed to slice its head apart from its body, making Zhou Qing wonder why this mission seemed to make it easier for him to get a reward. But just then, the monster whose head had been cut off got back up. It started to regenerate its wounds. Zhou Qing was again confused as to how this monster was alive again, but no matter what, and no matter how much he recovered, Zhou Qing would continue to kill him. Zhou Qing's powerful slash managed to slit the fallen apostle's body, but the huge wound quickly reattached. Zhou Qing tried to kill it again, this time in a different way. He used his fire, but still the monster was able to regenerate again, splitting his body in 2, making a hole in his body that can still be healed. Because he was still thinking how to kill him, he was hit in the stomach. He even thought that this mission was only meant to kill himself. Zhou Qing reconsidered what had happened. Or could this be a bug? That was impossible. He remembered the mission that this was a dungeon challenge, so this place was a dungeon. Zhou Qing understood what had happened. He started advancing towards the fallen apostle. A powerful axe hit him, easily dodged the attack. He headed for a door that he had not touched before. Zhou Qing directly smashed the door in one strike. He already knew that this was a dungeon, so there was no way that small room was called a dungeon. Beyond the door, there was another monster that turned out to be the fallen apostle's main body and summoned monster all along. After finding the mastermind, Zhou Qing took his sword. The fallen apostle had also chased after Zhou Qing from behind, but Zhou Qing was already faster. With just one strong slash, the monster in front of him had been split in two and died. The death of that monster simultaneously destroyed the fallen apostle, and its mission was complete. Zhou Qing was rewarded with a monster summoning skill that was no longer restricted by the dungeon, which meant that the skill could be used outside, and previously this skill could only be used in the dungeon he was tied to, namely the dungeon burial area, but now Zhou Qing could summon the monster outside, even though can only summon one type of monster, and also the cooldown using this skill is reduced by 10 seconds. Zhou Qing was happy after his skills were not restricted, and after that, his body disappeared. Back again to Stockton, who was confused about how Zhou Qing disappeared. At that time, from behind, Zhou Qing had appeared and immediately fended him off. With his reflexes, Stockton could withstand Zhou Qing's sudden attack and taunt him. "So you came back only to seek your death?" "You're wrong, I came back to kill you," said Zhou Qing. Didn't stop Stockton again mocking Zhou Qing, he said. It's not better to just hide, but he is also happy and will fulfill Zhou Qing's expectations. Stockton charged forward. Zhou Qing smiled mockingly, and at that moment a green flame appeared, which formed a hand and caught Stockton. It was the suture monster that took it out of its stomach. Zhou Qing had already advanced to direct his slash to kill the Stockton, but the attack just missed a lot of bats. Stockton's body returned intact to the top. He finally knew that Zhou Qing was a summoner, but why did he have such strong physical and magical strength? Zhou Qing said, "Just worry about your safety." In the past, when there were lots of fireballs beside Stockton, Stockton looked under the many magical beasts that were ready to attack him. He could only take the attack and return furiously to Zhou Qing, who was carrying troops. From behind Zhou Qing's body there was a dimensional tear that took out many undead. The undead immediately rushed towards Stockton. Easily, Stockton could fight all the weak undead that he considered trash. "Then they are trash too?" Zhou Qing said as he took out his strongest monster bone dragon. From his mouth immediately came out a blue flame that burned everything in front of him. Stockton was terrified. He had to run before it was too late. Unfortunately, it was too late because his head was already cut off by Zhou Qing, who said, "Don't show fear in battle." Zhou Qing himself was confused why there had not been any notification that Stockton was dead. And then from Stockton's body appeared an evil aura that immediately entered Zhou Qing's body. He once again underestimated and wanted to steal Zhou Qing's body. From within, he only needed to destroy his soul and obtain a complete body. But he did not know who the soul residing in Zhou Qing's spirit world's body was. Stockton searched for where his soul was, and finally he found out who was in it. It was the Demon King Adasalai. Kneeling down, one word from Adasalai was enough to make him kneel down, shaking in fear. He didn't expect that the one he had been fighting against was Adasalai. "Are you telling me to go out and die?" Stockton understood the situation and immediately begged to be turned into a dog, but it was Adasalai who chose to kill Stockton's soul. He knew even Stockton didn't deserve to be my dog. After that, he believed Stockton was dead, with Zhou Qing getting 50,000 XP from killing him. Adasalai wouldn't want someone to take Zhou Qing's body. Thus, Zhou Qing had already leveled up to 18. At that time, Zhou Qing's body felt excruciating pain. He thought that Stockton was not dead, but the system said something else. Zhou Qing had just killed a player with a vampire bloodline, so the vampire bloodline belonged to Zhou Qing flourished. After that, the blood of the people he killed all came out and headed towards Zhou Qing. Another skill unlocked and he gained Dark Assault skill, Blood Burst technique, Vampire Mark, and Blood Frenzy. Vampire skill also rose to level 5, removes all negative effects, added knowledge, and can detect blood from a certain distance. His vampire set also gets stronger. He can be immortal for 15 seconds and can control corpses. He also got a Stockton sword named Blood Demon Battle Sword, which is at historical level. After that, Zhou Qing felt that some people had moved over there. Maybe it was from the GM of the association. So Zhou Qing immediately left the place using the teleportation skill of his new sword. Then came 3 people, including the GM, who was the same as before. They saw a lot of bodies from the Vampire Guild, and one of them was Stockton. The GM also found a body from a member of the Wolf Soul clan. The GM told his men to tell the leader about this, because if anyone dare to touch a member of the Soul Wolf clan, that person will definitely move. That meant his guildmaster, an awakener named Beast God Matt. Meanwhile, in another posh-looking place in a swimming pool, there was a burly blonde man on a girl's lap on a call. He was Liu Yi, the one who led the human group to raid the Adasalai dungeon. Liu Yi had received news that his cousin had been killed. Although he didn't care about it, Liu Yi was still curious about who dared to kill him. If one of his subordinates died, it would be the same as opposing him. Meanwhile, the one who contacted Liu Yi was a mysterious old man. He said, "Don't worry, someone else will take care of it, especially since that person also killed a clan member." This grandpa asked if Liu Yi was sure to sell this weapon. Liu Yi said he was sure. He had researched the weapon for years, but did not know how to use it. The weapon only recognized the owner and would not be of any use to Liu Yi. After hanging up the phone, this grandpa said that the weapon in front of him was perfect, but it was a shame that no one could use it. Back to Zhou Qing, who was already in front of Miyamoto's house, which turned out to be very big. Before knocking on the door had already opened, and an uncle with a mustache appeared who already knew who Zhou Qing was, and said that Miss Miyamoto was waiting for him. "He is Uncle Liu, the guard of Miyamoto House. Liu Sengchan, level 50 profession is deacon." Uncle Liu asked if it was true that Zhou Qing helped his lady complete the mission, afraid that he would be found out, but after hearing the next story he was very confused. Uncle Liu said the head of the family joined Adisa Lai's raid 10 years ago. He was killed there, and only 5 players survived. This is a strange story, because as long as he remembers he saw that many humans were still alive. Because Adesalai was threatened by his family that Liu Yi would kill him. After Adesalai was killed, he was sure that many players were still alive. Whatever happened there after he died was still mysterious, and now he doesn't feel guilty anymore. Uncle Liu just said that and said that Miss Miyamoto had a very miserable life, and he raised her from a young age so Uncle Liu would not allow anyone to be mean to her. Zhou Qing felt Uncle Liu's strong killing intent and was confused as to why Uncle Liu treated like a husband-to-be. At that time he heard a very familiar voice from behind. It was Xiao Xiao's voice together with the burly man who now seemed to be his bodyguard. Xiao Xiao ran to hug him. He was very worried about his brother and was happy that his brother was okay. Zhou Qing comforted his crying sister and said those evil people had left and would not bother Xiao Xiao and that he should go see Miyamoto. Uncle Liu saw his closeness to his sister. Of course Zhou Qing would kill anyone who dared to disturb his sister. Uncle Liu liked Zhou Qing. He also escorted him to the room where Miyamoto was. Inside there was Miyamoto who was already waiting. Miyamoto looked very nervous, as if he was on a date with Zhou Qing. After that, he asked, how did Zhou Qing kill Stockton, who was level 40? But because he knew that Zhou Qing did not want to answer, Miyamoto changed the topic. He said that the background of the person Zhou Qing killed was extremely dangerous. That Stockton was Liu Yi's cold-blooded cousin. He was not worried about Liu Yi. But there was one more person. Zhou Qing said he didn't leave any traces there. But Miyamoto said that if it was the leader of the Wolf Soul clan, he would definitely be able to find Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing was confused as to what Wolf Soul was. Were they butchers? Their leader was Matt, who was a beast god profession, who had a very strong sense of smell, and could smell whatever happened there in a month. Fortunately, the main headquarters was in another part of the mainland, so he not coming here anytime soon. While they were still talking, Uncle Liu already came in noisily because this is a very important matter. It's about Adesalai. He said Adesalai's weapon will be auctioned. This information is very accurate. The weapon will be auctioned in a month, on Adesa's 10th death anniversary Lai. Adesalai, who was in Zhou Qing's body, became emotional when there was a celebration of his death. Miyamoto knew that no one could use that weapon. Even if someone used it, it would be torn up immediately. Zhou Qing smiled happily, hearing that because indeed the weapon had already bound his soul with him, only Zhou Qing or Adesalai could wield it. Zhou Qing only had 1 month's time. He had to change professions and had to get his valuables back. Just as he said, Zhou Qing wanted to grow stronger. At this time at night, Zhou Qing saw that there was a woman who was about to be attacked by perverts. Zhou Qing was very happy because that pervert was level 25 and he must have gotten a lot of XP. Before continuing his unimportant chatter, Zhou Qing immediately killed that person. He earned 3,000 XP. The woman immediately ran away in fear at Zhou Qing's behavior. He was about to reach level 20 and was planning to find another target. But at that time, the system popped up telling him how much XP he got from his dungeon, and he finally reached level 20 and could change professions. Zhou Qing was very happy to hear that, but afterwards the system announced that the dungeon had been successfully completed and would be repaired. The repair was up to 7 days because of that. Zhou Qing's strength was reduced a lot, and all skills from the dungeon would be locked. Even the attribute buff was also gone. He was curious about who was the person who managed to clear the dungeon, and then showed what happened in the dungeon burial area. There was a bone dragon that had been killed with 2 people on it. Players who participated in the raid praised that person for being able to defeat this dungeon alone. The player's name was Long Yan Wu, and he said he was bringing other players to be witnesses. Basically, this guy just wanted to show off. He was already level 20 and could change professions. Meanwhile, in the middle of the city appeared a dimensional gate. That dungeon is very dangerous. Moreover, it appeared in the middle of the city. After the appearance of the dungeon, there was a huge explosion around it. The Central Association said it was in M City. They saw the dungeon explode until it destroyed M City. There was information that came in. It was a profession change dungeon. It's not just an ordinary profession change dungeon. That day, all the warriors and knights who had not changed professions received system notifications, including Zhou Qing and Long Yan Wu, the legendary necromancer knight's job change. Zhou Qing ran over many buildings to quickly head to the location where the dungeon opened. He didn't expect the necromancer knight class to appear in the human world. In front of the dungeon, he had to get that profession, which turned out to be true. In front of the dungeon, there was already an association that had sealed the dungeon. Zhou Qing immediately went there using the bat transformation skill. Zhou Qing was ready to slaughter anyone who stood in his way to get the profession. In front of the dungeon, there were already many players protesting because they were not allowed to enter, even though they had the right to change professions. There were people from the association who said they had the right to go inside if they could beat him. Who was already there saw his condition. He already knew that this associate person was level 35, a paladin. It was definitely difficult for a level 20 player to win against him. There was one player who was furious. He took out his weapon to challenge the associate person. He dashed forward to break through, enter the dungeon. The paladin was still calm with the weak attack, and after that, the player immediately flew into the wall. Paladin once again emphasized that you can continue to try. Now who will be next? While other players are starting to get scared at seeing Paladin's strength. Unlike Zhou Qing, who has advanced not because he can't enter, Zhou Qing is curious about Paladin's strength. But just then came the level 24 Santianxiang warrior. Arrogantly, he told Zhou Qing to stop and just go home. He was with an old man behind him. Zhou Qing gave him a killing aura. You want to die? But the paladins who were previously strict with ordinary players began to tame in front of the IGA guild members and let them in. Players who saw that could only sneer at the association, which was indeed a collection of trash that could only look down on ordinary players like them. Zhou Qing immediately understood the association as if it wanted to protect ordinary users. In fact, they only wanted to share this profession between a few people. Associations are formed only to protect the interests of some groups. Tianxiang approached Zhou Qing and taunted him. You lowly player is the wrong person to provoke. Zhou Qing didn't care who San Tianxiang was. He dealt a powerful punch to sweep that scum out of his sight. Like most rich kids who are spoiled once beaten, he immediately asked for help from his bodyguard, whom he called Uncle Chen. Uncle Chen increased his aura to threaten Zhou Qing. He said he disturbed the wrong person, and he would beat up Zhou Qing. Just then came Uncle Liu, who prevented Uncle Chen. Are you sure you want to touch the Miyamoto family? Uncle Chung was immediately frightened by the sight of the Miyamoto family's butler. And so was Zhou Qing, who was taken aback by Uncle Liu's arrival. There Uncle Cheng told Tianxiang stories about Uncle Liu. At that time, Uncle Liu brought a little girl to explore the dungeon. Even though it was surrounded by many enemies in the end, Uncle Liu killed more than 100 players alone. Uncle Chen told Tianxiang to just go, and they must respect the Miyamoto family. But he still managed to give a warning to Zhou Qing. In his heart, he would torture Zhou Qing until he begged to be killed. Uncle Liu told Zhou Qing, Miss Miyamoto saw that he didn't come back soon, and thought that Zhou Qing was here. Uncle Liu came to help him. Zhou Qing thanked him, but he still wanted to use the old way of challenging the paladin. Paladin said it was unnecessary with Zhou Qing's level. He couldn't pass the test. He underestimated Zhou Qing. Shut your mouth, you'll never know until you try. The paladin was slightly emotional hearing Zhou Qing's words. He immediately increased his strength and accepted Zhou Qing's challenge, and he had already charged forward to punch Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing easily caught the paladin's punch, which he thought was very weak. Now it was my turn. The paladin was shocked. How come Zhou Qing was this strong, and he couldn't escape Zhou Qing's clutches? The paladin could only use the paladin barrier skill. Zhou Qing mercilessly dealt countless blows to the paladin until the paladin said he gave up. May I enter now? After getting Zhou Qing's agreement with Uncle Liu walked in. Zhou Qing complained, "How come the GM of the association was too weak?" After passing the paladin, they haven't entered the dungeon yet, but already in front of the dungeon Zhou Qing saw many players who had gathered. There were several people highlighted such as Ma Tang Yun Warrior level 23, level 21 Knight Dio. Then there was Juju Warrior level 20. These are low-level players who haven't changed professions like him. There were also high-level players, and it seemed they had come to lead the low-level players, including the level 45 Breaker, Liu Ryu, the level 50 Luo Changlei Saint Knight. Someone was talking from behind. He was praising Zhou Qing's fighting ability, which could beat a level 35 player in an instant. His level was still 20. He didn't expect that there was such a talented person from the Miyamoto family besides Miyamoto. Zhou Qing looked back and was immediately convinced that this person was one of the people who participated in the conquest of Adasalai. This person could see his level. He introduced himself. His name was Li Ji Yu. The Spirit Guild leader's profession was Death Judge, and his level was unknown. He also came with two people. One was called Yan Wu. Seeing the two people, Zhou Qing knew that one of them had the aura of the devil race, who walked with a woman with long ears like elf. Zhou Qing knew that it was Anji who was still alive. He was the same one that Liu Yi held hostage. Zhou Qing couldn't contain his emotions until the man asked why Zhou Qing was staring at him so intently. Uncle Liu replied to his words, "Whoever you meet for the first time will definitely be wary of aura killing you." Their chat continued until Li Ji Yu brought up the matter of Miyamoto Nana, who finally became an awakener, and said, "Uncle Louis, what do you mean head of the family?" Previously, he asked how Uncle Miyamoto was killed by Adasalai. Li Ji Yu explained that Miyamoto was killed while helping them to retreat. When they were away, suddenly Adasalai went crazy and slaughtered many players. There were 4 players who survived, including himself, and Uncle Miyamoto attracted Adesalai's attention alone, so they could get an opening to kill Adesalai. Unfortunately, Uncle Miyamoto is exhausted. Hearing that Zhou Qing knew that this person was lying because there was no such incident, he was even more curious. What really happened after he blew himself up? Li Ji Yu introduced his guild member Long Yan Wu, after which he took his leave to return. Zhou Qing said in his heart that I will definitely come and kill you, and must save Anji from Yan Wu. Uncle Liu asked if Zhou Qing had any grudge against Li Ji Yu. Uncle Liu advised him to be careful because Li Ji Yu awakened his powers at the age of 18, and he was considered a genius. Zhou Qing said with a smile, "Why did I bother him?" After that came the 2 Eastern Region player associations named Zhanghu Fist King level 60, he said, for all players to prepare. Uncle Liu advised Zhou Qing to be careful. This is a profession change dungeon. All players will do whatever it takes to get it. Zhou Qing already knew about it, telling the information that this dungeon gave the necromancer knight profession, which meant that only knights or warriors could enter. There was no level limit, but there were profession requirements, and this had no challenge capacity limit. Hearing that many players chose not to enter, so the difficulty of the dungeon was different from the challenge capacity. There was no limit to the challenge capacity, indicating that this dungeon was super difficult. This type of dungeon had only appeared once before, as he expected it to be the Adasalai dungeon. This kind of dungeon was extremely difficult, which would not allow a single player to face alone, and the best way was to cooperate to raid. "Can I enter now?" Zhou Qing had all the information and wanted to rush into the dungeon. Zhang Hu asked if you wanted to go alone. "I don't need a burden." "All right, I'll go in to hear from Zhou Qing." Many burdened users were angry and didn't expect someone to be arrogant about him. Anji said that person is reckless and will become everyone's enemy. But what he said is true. Forming a team is also a stupid decision because only one person will change profession. It is true that if there is a change of profession, human greed will be exposed. Yan Wu agreed since everyone was an enemy to invade this dungeon, one person was more than enough. After entering Zhou Qing's dungeon and teleport to the lava area, every player who enters will be transported to a different place. And it just so happened that Zhou Qing was here. He was given a mission to kill the boss of the Purgatory Lord. When finished, Zhou Qing could return to the city. Zhou Qing knew that this mission was not likely to change his profession. There was only an order to kill the boss. Zhou Qing's other goal was now added. He wanted to save Anji to find out what really happened after Ade Salai died. Yanwu herself had a mysterious threat, and her fighting ability was not modestly shown by her status. At that moment, a level 30 lava worm emerged from the ground. Zhou Qing prepared to fight it. He saw that the lava worm was spewing lava from its mouth. Zhou Qing easily slashed the lava worm. From killing lava worms, he got 50 conquest points, which surprised him. The lava worms suddenly exploded themselves strong enough to withstand the explosion, and also he had self-recovery skills. After the big explosion, many lava worms also appeared. Zhou Qing smiled happily. It was finally getting interesting. Zhou Qing advanced, easily slashed all those lava worms that were too weak. Even if he self-detonated, Zhou Qing could already figure it out. Even though he got a lot of conquest points at this time, he couldn't use his skills because his bound dungeon was cleared by Yanwu. Zhou Qing felt a vibration and aura from a distance, which he believed to be another player, and Zhou Qing immediately checked there. There were 4 people, 1 female and 3 male. They faced the lava golem, who was ready to punch the 4 people. One person took out a paper to activate the Saint Light protection skill. From the talisman emerged a light barrier that blocked the lava golem's punch. In the other hand, he used the talisman paper. In addition, he combined the movement of the lava golem. The other 3 people immediately charged at the stopped-moving lava golem. Zhou Qing praised the power of the talisman card that Tianxiong brought. Zhou Qing was just looking from above. Observing that person's fight, Tianxiong smiled slyly. There was one piece of paper he used that suddenly stabbed 2 others, while this woman managed to protect herself. The lava golems were already crushed and dead. This lady was very angry, asking Tianxiong what he was doing, and she wanted to join them not to increase her chances of survival, but to reduce her competition. This lady was enraged by Tianxiong's behavior. She got separated from Uncle Zhang, who came with her to help her get a profession. But they got separated after entering the dungeon, and Tianxiong praised her good armor while taking out some talismans. He also knew that this woman must have strong background. Just then, from behind him appeared Zhou Qing. What a good item. Congratulations, you managed to catch my eye. Tianxiong foolishly replied to Zhou Qing's words. This talisman card was a divine card that the vice clan leader personally made for him. Tianxiong was startled and looked back. He knew who Zhou Qing was. And at that moment, Zhou Qing's powerful fist had landed right on his cheek. This woman was also shocked by Zhou Qing's sudden presence. You are too mean. Do I have to punch you? One more time so you can realize. Tianxiong still harbored a grudge. He was confident that he could kill Zhou Qing alone. Zhou Qing laughed. Who said you have the thing I want, so I have to kill you to get it? Tianxiong was happy that the prey had appeared on its own. Zhou Qing continues to ridicule him. Was that your last word? Tianxiong was consumed by his emotions and used the remaining black card, which turned out to be able to summon shadow assassins, and ordered shadow assassins to paralyze Zhou Qing. The shadow assassins started to move by disappearing from the shadows and appearing behind the shadows. But to Zhou Qing's surprise, a single punch had already managed to destroy the shadows. It's just that this is too weak. Tianxiong reasoned that if just 1% of his strength just now, he will show death to Zhou Qing. Then, don't disappoint me. Your chance is almost up. After that, a coffin appeared which crashed into Zhou Qing. If this was still weak, Tianxiong used the skill card Darkness again. A slash of darkness flew towards Zhou Qing, but it had no effect whatsoever on Zhou Qing. Has your skill run out of ridicule? It made Tianxiong's face even uglier because right now he was very annoyed. He used another 3 skills, and Zhou Qing, who received the skill, was just happy. This skill is actually a strong skill, only because the one who uses it is Tianxiong. This skill becomes empty. Its attributes are also very weak. If it's even stronger, it can definitely kill Zhou Qing. Tianxiong began to realize that his opponent was too strong. He was confused why Zhou Qing was stronger, even though they both had not changed professions. Don't equate me with trash like you. In my eyes, you are just a fly. Zhou Qing has disappeared from his sight. Vampire Mark's strong punch blows Tianxiong away. His historical great armor is destroyed. Only 2 cards left, and this 1 card is not allowed. He used it and had to use it against bosses, so Tianxiong would use another card to escape. Zhou Qing had already stepped forward to end Tianxiong's life. At that time, he used his card Darkness. Thanks to that, Zhou Qing's 5 senses disappeared and made him stop moving. Now he could kill Zhou Qing, but to his surprise, Zhou Qing asked instead, "Are you sure you're not a clown?" Zhou Qing's one stab managed to kill Tianxiong. "How come you can run away?" Because Tianxiong's first punch was Vampire Mark, which could mark where the target was. Zhou Qing took Tianxiong's 10 cards that could only be used once. He also saw one card that was so terrifying that it became Tianxiong's ace against bosses. If only this card had been used by Tianxiong against Zhou Qing, he would have lost. The woman who previously approached Zhou Qing and thanked him would definitely give her a price. In Zhou Qing's mind, he actually wanted to get rid of the woman, but at that time another man came who had prepared 3 magic spells behind him, telling Zhou Qing to get away from his lady. After seeing the person's level, his name was Zhang Shouyi, warrior level 55. Luckily, there was this woman who stopped Uncle Zhang. This woman explained that Zhou Qing saved his life and helped from bad people. Uncle Zhang finally began to understand. This woman introduced herself as Zhang Jingjing, a woman who was a level 27 warrior, and also introduced her uncle, also introduced herself. Change panel details and abilities as he likes. It's just a fake ability. His real attribute and profession will still not change. It's very overpowered because he can enter in any dungeon. Jingjing invited Zhou Qing to go work with her. If her uncle was around, it would be much easier to solve this. Zhou Qing refused. He preferred to be alone. Besides that, Zhou Qing knew that Zhang Shouyi was a dangerous person, so it was better to avoid him. Shouyi praised Zhou Qing, who was very careful and cunning. He used his skills to see Zhou Qing's status to determine whether he was a threat or not. After that, the ball he used to analyze exploded, meaning Zhou Qing's start could not be seen. Zhou Qing was no ordinary person, and he had to be killed to stay out of trouble. Meanwhile, in another place, there is a group that is fighting a level 35 flaming demon spirit. They are having trouble because there is no healer or long-range attacker, because only warriors are allowed to enter the dungeon. There also turned out to be Yanwu and Anji. Yanwu, who has an arrogant and narcissistic nature, he says this dungeon is too boring. Anji told him to shut up and get rid of the monster. Yanwu pulled out his greatsword. He stepped forward, surprising the other warriors, who swiftly jumped to avoid the monster's fireballs, and delivered a powerful attack that killed the monster in one hit. That was the meteor slash technique. After defeating it, Yanwu asked if all of you saw him would get angry, and told them to keep his abilities a secret. But instead, Yanwu told them to share their stories. He even told them to follow so they could witness his abilities. Meanwhile, behind the rock, there was Zhou Qing watching over them. He already knew that Yanwu was a strong person. His goal was to kill the boss, and he would seek opportunities. While following along, waiting for the right time to attack, that was Adesalai's nature from the past. In the profession change dungeon, Yanwu continued his actions. He was in the area of a goblin-like monster, but the color was red. He slaughtered all the monsters, even the monsters started to fear him. He who had advanced both hands was blazing. He used a meteor impact. Blow after blow managed to slay all the monsters there. He belonged to the boxer profession, and did not have weapons or special items when using the skill just now. And it was very similar to him. Yan Wu's stats were not any lower than his. Luckily, Yan Wu wasn't too smart. Yan Wu was so excited by the cool action, he headed to the statue that was used as a seal. At that time, a fireball came from the witch monster, but even though it was hit by the fireball, Yan Wu was still alive and managed to kill the witch. Yan Wu continued his activities. He said the treasure must be in the statue, so he used his greatsword, hearing the words of the witch, that they had kept this seal from past generations so that the Lord of Hell would not wake up. Zhou Qing wondered. Is this Lord of Hell the boss who was sealed? Yan Wu, who was already curious about what treasure was sealed, easily destroyed the statue. After that, they were surprised by the sudden vibration from the ground. A green flame exploded. Yan Wu, who had good reflexes, avoided the explosion. From there, a level 25 spirit warhorse emerged. Yan Wu was still bewildered by the monster, surprised when the warhorse had already charged at him, which had also swiftly attacked him. But strangely, its attack seemed to only penetrate. But the warhorse with insane speed was able to dodge the attack. That from the explosion just now came a voice that said that it had been sealed for 10,000 years and was finally free. From it appeared a level 60 demon race Lord of Hell in the form of a woman with sheep's horns. Prepare to accept your fate. "I will burn all your hopes," said the Lord of Hell, who was already surrounded by green flames. The flame attack hit all players, including Yanwu. Zhou Qing could defend with all his might. He was still confused why a dungeon like this had such a strong boss. Many users had been turned to dust by the green flames. Yanwu was lucky to be protected by Anzi. Anzi said, "Prepare to fight." The Lord of Hell strangely saw the two of them because there was a demon race together, with the human race working together. In his hand there was already a green fireball, which he threw directly at Anji. As soon as the fireball had arrived in front of him, a voice said that this was strange. The ruler of Hell was surprised and asked who he was. Zhou Qing, who had easily caught the green fire. "You must not hurt the people I love." Seeing that his attack was easily stopped, he praised Zhou Qing, while Anji was crying. There was no way his long-dead father was here. It turned out that Anji was Adesalai's son. Adesalai patted his head. "You're still a crybaby. Sorry for making you suffer for these years, now that Daddy is here. From now on, I will protect you." Feeling a touch on his head, Anji is sure that this is really his father. But why is his father in a human body? By taking his sword, he wanted to finish off Yanwu, who had enslaved his son. But Anji stopped him. He said that Yanwu was not a bad person, but in these years, Yanwu had been the one protecting him, and Anji had a contract with him. Zhou Qing believed in him, and Yanwu called him Daddy. But Zhou Qing immediately got angry because he was called Daddy so casually. Zhou Qing shifted his focus because he had to defeat the Lord of Hell first. The Lord of Hell had already prepared a big green fire in his hand, and said if you want a reunion of father and son, just do it in hell. The big green fire was already aiming at them. The three of them were prepared with their respective auras. The three of them managed to avoid the fire and advanced together to attack the Lord of Hell. But because the level difference is so great that the Lord of Hell is still fine, at that time suddenly the Master of Hell disappears. He immediately appears behind Anji and chooses to kill Anji first. The Lord of Hell stabs Anji's body. These two people screamed in fear seeing their loved ones stabbed, without much ado. Both of them went straight to the ****** Lord. Using their respective skills, the two swift attacks succeeded in hitting the ***** Lord and keeping him away from Anji's body. Luckily, Yanwu had Saint Heal healing, which he could quickly use directly to heal Anji, who thankfully could still be saved. Receiving both attacks, the Lord of Hell appeared unharmed, and to him it was like a normal massage. Zhou Qing felt a sense of hopelessness when his family members were hurt, but he couldn't do anything. Zhou Qing was furious because he had been reminded of a bad incident. The ***** of Hell just asked, what bad memory is worse than meeting him? Zhou Qing was so angry. He raised his strength and charged straight into the face of the ***** Lord, even the **** ruler. Until shocked by Zhou Qing's speed, Zhou Qing's attack managed to injure half of his face. You say you are the ruler of Hell, but don't know the real Hell. Let me tell you what the real Hell is like. The bloodburst technique will end in 10 seconds, and he only has 1 HP left. If he is hit by just one attack, he is dead. The goal is to give as much damage as possible before the 10 seconds are over. Yanwu, who saw that, was very amazed by Zhou Qing's strength, which made the level 60 monster immobile. Attack after attack launched by Zhou Qing to the point where the ruler of Hell was battered. Many serious injuries were caused by Zhou Qing. This technique indeed made the damage produced by the user change. Became HP after that. At that time there was a green flame that attacked Zhou Qing. He quickly immediately dodged. The Lord of Hell still managed to get up. He was so angry with Zhou Qing that he was injured to this extent. Suddenly he transformed. His temperature became greater and looked even more demonic. He vowed to remove all of Zhou Qing's organs. Yanwu was very depressed due to the extremely strong pressure of the ***** Lord. Come forward if you dare to challenge Zhou Qing. Even after seeing the true form of the ***** Lord, the emotions were already running high. The ***** directly attacked Zhou Qing. After that attack, he was sure that his enemy was burnt. But that didn't happen because Zhou Qing was still alive. He said, if you have this skill, the Lord of Hell is angry. How can this human withstand his attack? In the second mode, because you will die. I will give you a secret. When you attacked me earlier, I left something in your body. It was a skill card that needed time to activate. And just when it was activated, the Lord of Hell didn't believe everything Zhou Qing said and started to use his third mode, which was definitely stronger. Black Active Skill Hole Trap was the name of the skill Zhou Qing put on the Lord of Hell's body. The skill was already active. A black hole appeared right on the Lord of Hell's chest. Even when he died, he kept screaming that Zhou Qing was weaker than an ant. That black hole directly exploded the body of the Lord of Hell. An ant? Then you are weaker than an ant, said Zhou Qing, who managed to defeat the Lord of Hell and obtained 6,000 subjugation points, and also unlocked the mid-tier quest. Apart from that, he also got a historical rank item, a Hell's Master certificate that can be used to strengthen fire-type skills, because it's not only improved, but can also be developed. With this, he can develop skeleton fire. Just then came Zhang Shouyi's group, who immediately asked if it was a profession change item. Arrogantly, he wanted it. The kind-hearted Jingjing said that Zhou Qing was her savior, but Shouyi said it was Jingjing's father's request and must get the item at any cost. Zhou Qing was pressed, because he had already used his trump card just now and it would be troublesome. Shouyi brought 2 high-level players. Yi Dujian is a level 45 Guardian fighter and also a level 50 Liu Fei. Shouyi says don't even think about being able to use that item. He threatens to kill NG, who is most important to Zhou Qing. Hearing that Yanwu was very angry, even he didn't seem to be there. Shouyi ridiculed those who to him were just trash. Zhou Qing laughed loudly. You guys are either stupid or overconfident if you guys want to kill NG. I really can't stop you guys, but do you think you can stop me from killing Zhang Jingjing? Shouyi immediately stiffened at those words, and Zhou Qing said that he will give it a chance. I will fight with you 3. Kill me, and you can get this item. That was Zhou Qing's plan to distract them and not let them hurt his son, Anji. Jingjing, who knew Zhou Qing would be killed, threatened her uncle that she would kill herself. Shouyi quickly knocked her unconscious. She was angry why this kid is useless unlike his father. Zhou Qing had already advanced to attack Shouyi. Dujian moved forward to create a barrier. Zhou Qing's attack was successfully reflected by the barrier. He used his magic to summon a small meteor, quickly. Zhou Qing immediately stepped back to avoid the meteor. Liu Fei was quickly caught in front of him and directly punched him. Zhou Qing, who received the attack, only said that he never expected to receive more attacks like this. At that time he saw the demon warhorse that previously came out of the Underworld Lord's seal. Finally, Zhou Qing realized why it was called the demon warhorse. He tried something by running towards the demon warhorse. Seeing their prey run away, Shouyi had predicted that and was going to use this technique to him ultimate skill falling stars. This time, the meteors were bigger and more numerous. With the command of Shouyi, the meteors fell towards Zhou Qing, who was still running after the warhorse. But strangely, the horse even knelt down. After that falling star had already hit and there was a strong explosion, Yanwu was even pessimistic that Zhou Qing was still alive. Shouyi ordered Dujian to check the corpse and help Jingjing change her profession. At that time, there was an explosion from Zhou Qing's area. It was seen from the smoke that Zhou Qing, who was still alive, tried to stand up with the warhorse behind him. After that, they saw that there was someone riding the demon warhorse. At that moment, a blue flame appeared which made Dujian quickly form a barrier, but strangely the flame froze after touching the barrier. Zhou Qing had gotten the legendary profession of Necromancer Knight and got Frostfire. Zhou Qing's look was wearing armor covering his arms and chest, didn't know that it was the horse that made the profession change item. He said that if it wasn't their guild who got it, then others couldn't getting it, meant that Zhou Qing would be killed by them. Zhou Qing said he hated riding horses and thought of something. At that time the demon warhorse changed shape according to his thoughts, and he became a motorbike, which Zhou Qing thought even cooler this time. Liu Fei stepped forward and tried to kick Zhou Qing, but Zhou Qing quickly avoided it. Liu Fei was surprised that the boxer class should have the most superior speed, but Zhou Qing was able to dodge his attack. Zhou Qing used motorcycle deathfire crash. It would be boring to kill them right away. You guys are still alive today because I wanted to use my new skill. At that time there was a chain that bound him from Shouyi, who was sure he could beat Zhou Qing. Even though they had obtained the legendary profession, these two people had already activated their strongest skills and immediately charged toward Zhou Qing, who was still tied up. But the two were shocked to find that Zhou Qing easily removed the chain from his body and resisted their 2 attacks. I told you I used you guys to test. My new skill and henceforth will be my strongest skill. Zhou Qing used the ***** certificate he just got. With that skill, Frostfire evolved into a fire skill. Zhou Qing immediately used it and burned the 2 people beside him. After being burnt, their bodies immediately froze, destroying their bodies, and from the two of them, Zhou Qing got a lot of XP. He also leveled up to level 26. Zhou Qing also saw another ice statue that was Shou Yi. He was very angry and said that he had lost and asked, "Quickly kill immediately. You are really unlucky when I leveled up earlier. I got a new skill. Active skill, Dead Spirit Summon." The two corpses got up and became zombies to order the two of them to immediately kill Shou Yi, who was very scared after being bitten by the zombie. He cursed Zhou Qing to die more miserably than him. Zhou Qing said that this skill can't use all the previous skills, but their basic attributes can still be used, and can only be used when they are dead. The attack mode only bites, but the person who is bitten will also become a zombie. Zhang Shou Yi was already a zombie after being bitten. Zhou Qing smiled happily because with this he had become stronger. Zhou Qing had already leveled up to the 28th level of the vampire set to level 20. Likewise, Moonshadow Invisibility and Corpse Control had also leveled up. Zhou Qing was very pleased with the results this time, and his revenge was getting closer. NG is conscious and his wound has also closed. He praises his father even though in a human body his father is still strong. Yanwu, who also joined in the praise, kept calling Zhou Qing father, and Zhou Qing immediately kicked him, unable to believe it because the guildmaster was one of the people who had participated in killing him. Zhou Qing pointed his sword at Yanwu's neck. He asked me, "Give me a reason to trust you, then I will decide to kill you or spare you." Seriously said to believe in him because their goal is the same, and he will help kill Liu Yi. Zhou Qing is confused why he betrayed the guild leader who has given so much resources. Anji said for another reason. It all started because of Yanwu's ability. Maybe Liu Yi had not yet realized that Yanwu already knew his purpose. Yanwu has abilities that other players don't have. The ability to imitate him can learn and test other people's abilities. If you want to imitate other people's abilities, there are 3 conditions. Firstly, Yanwu must touch the palm of that person's hand. Secondly, Yanwu cannot imitate skills that are higher than his ability. Thirdly, for each profession, Yanwu can only imitate 1 skill. After Yanwu learned Liu Yi's skills, he knew that Liu Yi's strongest technique was very special. The limited domination skill could only be used once, could bind to a corpse and inherit all the skills possessed by that corpse. After that moment, he realized why Liu Yi always gives strange looks. It reminded him of the pigman getting ready to kill his pig. Yanwu was furious when he realized that he was only being used like a pig, which when he was fat, Liu Yi would kill him immediately. Yanwu says he can provide detailed information about Liu Ziyi, and their goal is to kill the same person. And Ji tells that in these years, thanks to Yanwu protecting him, he has not suffered much. Zhou Qing will temporarily believe not in Yanwu, but believe in Yanwu because of Anji. "If you dare to betray me, you will die." Zhou Qing asked why Anji became so weak. He said his strength was being sealed. It wasn't because Liu Yi had sealed him, Zhang Hao. He was the one who fought with Adasalai, and was also hit by the explosion. But it turned out that the person was still alive. He also asked what the truth was. Happened after Adasalai died. Anji remembered the incident and said the massacre of the 4 players slaughtered all the players for the dungeon prize. He asked what about Adasalai's people. Most of them were captured and made into slaves, but rest assured, most of them managed to escape, and they are very safe now. When the time comes, Father can look for them. Zhou Qing thought that the dungeon had been destroyed, and the people inside fled to Earth. But that was not the reality looking for them, because the dungeon had never been closed even after Adasalai's death. Anji didn't know why at first, but now he understood. The dungeon wasn't closed because the boss Adasalai was still alive. He asked where the entrance to the dungeon was. Anji knew the location, but it would be difficult to enter there. At this time, he looked at the dungeon of Demon King Adasalai and saw Zhang Hao guarding the place, the mysterious level and race and profession of the guardian of the Garden of Eden. Meanwhile, Zhang Jingjing, who had fainted before, woke up. She didn't look at her uncle and asked, "What are you guys doing?" Where are her uncle and friends? Hearing Zhou Qing's words, "Don't worry." She thought that her uncle wasn't killed. Zhou Qing continued, "I mean, they are all dead." Jingjing looked back and saw that there were 3 dead zombies. She asked why Zhou Qing had to kill them. Zhou Qing asked back, "You seriously said that? They tried to kill me, and I was good to leave their corpses intact." Jingjing said that her uncle was good people and always helping her. Zhou Qing told her you might not be aware, but they had already killed other players before meeting you. It was for Jingjing's good, They were afraid that other players would usurp the legendary profession. Jingjing still couldn't believe the shocking fact. Zhou Qing didn't care whether Jingjing believed it or not because they were about to leave the dungeon. Anji asked, "Why not just kill Jingjing? She must have someone behind her with extraordinary power." Zhou Qing said, "Leave it alone if they want revenge. I will kill them all." 3 days later, Zhou Qing was seen taking Xiao Xiao out. Many people recognized him now after the news about Zhou Qing getting the legendary profession of Necromancer Knight. After exiting the dungeon, he said that it was a boss fight and only 5 people survived. The people there asked who got the legendary profession, and Zhou Qing confidently answered, "It was me. Is there a problem?" The response was that many players invited them to join the guild, which was very natural because this was a world where the strong would survive, and he would also invite people with legendary professions. Jingjing herself didn't reveal the truth that happened in the dungeon. Seeing his brother who looked gloomy, Xiao really wanted his brother to be happy. Part of him saw Xiao Xiao happy was enough. Next, Xiao Xiao was going to the amusement park. When ready to run, he bumped into someone and it hurt him. The man apologized and asked if Xiao was okay. Xiao Xiao said he was fine and said that he was the one who was wrong for being careless and didn't see the road. Saw that man Zhou Qing looked at him suspiciously, but instead smiled. After being asked by Xiao Xiao, he also apologized. They were too focused on chatting to not pay attention to other people. The man said it was okay. He also had a younger brother and understood that feeling. After that, the man immediately left. Zhou Qing had seen that person's status, which turned out to be only level 10. But why did this person threaten him? He already knew. After the appearance of Zhang Shouyi, there sometimes the level and class panel could go wrong. Zhou Qing wondered who the previous man was. The previous man seemed to continue walking and headed towards an alley. There was one person who seemed to be guarding a place, and he said that this place is not a place that can be entered, just anyone. The man asked, "Sorry, but this place is the territory of the Wolf Soul Gang. I want to ask your boss." The guard was shocked. "How did this man know this place?" The man said, "Just get out of the way." But at that time, the guard immediately hit him. The guard would not let the man enter. The man who at first looked like a weak man got up again. His strength appeared. There was a red aura enveloping his body. "You said that, but actually I have the intention to kill you and you must die now." The man looks more ferocious than before. And sometime later, the GM, the association, had arrived at that place and looked inside. There were already many gang corpses lying pathetically. The GM even said that players who were killed by monsters didn't get to this tragic. After that, the bodies were removed, and the GM said they from the gang were seen killed by several players. His colleagues said killers' players are getting rampant, and this time more than 10 players are dead. It seems that among the victims of the gang of soul wolves named Zhang Da Zhuang, who was level 50, and had his body twisted and humiliated. The GM said this time's killing was different from the previous killings. This time the victim died very sadistically. He was sure the killing this time was not him, and this time a murder that had a specific purpose. Another colleague who had bangs covering his forehead asked if these two knew about violet blood. It was a new kind of illusion drug and the gang selling it. He wasn't sure yet. Blood, but those higher-ups couldn't act. The reason was simple, because the person who made violet blood was the insect king Park Luqian. He was one of the people who belonged to the Awakener. Meanwhile, Jingjing was seen entering a dungeon. She apologized to her father for not being able to complete her mission. It turned out that her father was Zhang Hao. He seemed to have used his angel form, and regretted Zhang Shouyi's death, even though the person was quite useful. Clear again. From the front appeared many monsters that came rushing at him. Zhang Hao had been waiting for someone for several years, and that person had not appeared yet. Zhang Hao used a magic circle that spawned an armored giant figure complete with Golden Saint Judgment Spear of Light, a powerful technique instantly destroying all the monsters in one strike and leaving a huge scar. On the other hand, there are 4 demons who say fail again, and instead give that person a lot of XP. The little demon who has animal ears and carries a tube in his lap says, "As long as one of us can reach the human world, he is sure he has felt the king is waiting for them." In the tube, there is a heart that seems to belong to Adesalai, and they are sure that their king Adesalai is still alive out there. Meanwhile, the previous man was seen in the meadow looking at the girl's photo. He says he has found traces of that person. Back in time previously, he already found out from the gang leader that Park Elchion would be attending the auction next week. After that, he immediately killed the gang leader, and he would wait another week for him to appear at the auction, and after that, they could be pain-free. Meanwhile, at the Miyamoto residence, Nana was doing sparring. After a light spar, it seemed that Zhou Qing had gotten stronger after changing professions. Zhou Qing was offended that Nana didn't use all of her skills just now. Nana apologized because she was too gentle, and if she used all her strength, this place would be destroyed. To choose another place where there was no one else, the two of them had already moved to another place that was more spacious and deserted. Nana asks if Zhou Qing is ready. His full power might be able to kill Zhou Qing. He's very ready with weapons, and just start using your strongest attack, and don't let me down. Miyamoto Nana also focused her strength on the katana. A purple aura enveloped her and a powerful slash was launched. Zhou Qing, who felt that there was only one word that appeared, died. Zhou Qing, who saw that, managed to dodge thanks to directly activating immortal states. He turned his head and saw the effect of Nana's attack, which was so powerful that it split the clouds in the ground. Zhou Qing was very angry, not angry because lost. He was angry after knowing the strength of a human after being awakened, especially since Nana had just awakened. It's been years since her fight with the 4 people who destroyed the Ade Salai dungeon, and surely they have become stronger. Nana regretted that after using her full strength and making Zhou Qing despair, and she had to bring Zhou Qing back to life. Zhou Qing knew he needed to be faster to shorten the difference in power, so he opened the system and was about to challenge the Demon King. After that, Zhou Qing immediately disappeared. Nana was confused. Where did Zhou Qing go? Even though he wanted to give encouragement, he disappeared first. Zhou Qing had already opened his eyes and saw that he was in the research facility. At that time, there was an explosion that destroyed the place. A player came in and said that the monsters that had run had been found, and they had to be killed. They had come out of the big tube and were confused about what had happened to him. Why did a player enter the Devil King challenge mission this time, and also what was wrong with his body? He saw his hands like a green monster. Zhou Qing turned to one mirror and saw that his body had become small, thin, green. Finally, Zhou Qing knew if he becomes a goblin. Why do you have to be a goblin? The middle-level mission has already started. The mission objective this time is to find the red dot on the map. He was disappointed with the ugly appearance of the goblin, especially since all of his items were locked. He also couldn't use skills. His attributes couldn't be seen either. Luckily for the mission this time, he could see the map and it was marked there where he could find the red core. At that time, there was a fire magic exploding behind him. With difficulty dodging the fire explosion, he could only run away. If with a goblin like this, how could he frighten other people? The magician who fired the fire magic complained about the goblin being very difficult to kill. While looking for where the goblin was from, behind him appeared Zhou Qing, who had brought a broken glass. Quickly, Zhou Qing directly slashed that person's neck. Even though being a goblin, Zhou Qing was still a demon king, so he would become the strongest goblin. And this dungeon looks difficult. Other players started to arrive and look for something. There was one player who saw Zhou Qing's whereabouts and said that the higher-ups of the members gave orders to kill all of them. Zhou Qing could only be stunned to hear those words, and he immediately ran, cursing the system that gave him a difficult mission. He ran to avoid all the arrows fired by the player. After that chase, the player lost track of Zhou Qing. Even though Zhou Qing was just hiding behind the trees, its green body makes it hard to spot. The players began to decide to split up and choose their own paths. Zhao Qing. He was lucky to escape here because it was close to the mission location. He complained to the system that required him to become a goblin. While continuing his journey to the item location, he ran into one player without Zhou Qing said a lot, and directly punched that person to death. Zhou Qing didn't expect that this goblin was stronger, and he could easily take care of one player. Zhou Qing's feelings started to be bad. Just spoke as soon as another player appeared who was emitting an eerie aura, and it turned out that the player had found an object of his research that actually shouldn't be wandering around. From here, it started to get weird here. Luqian still didn't wear a cover-up and was carrying a small praying mantis in his hand. Zhou Qing knew that his enemy was stronger and could not be defeated, so he ran away from Park Luqian. Zhou Qing regretted his words, smiled he would not let the goblin escape. The previously small praying mantis became big and immediately cut open Zhou Qing's body. Park Luqian regretted the death of his research object. After taking care of the monster, Park Luqian immediately left, while Zhou Qing looked still alive, but already at the end of his life was crawling in pain. His life would soon end, even though the Intui Chimera was right in front of him. Zhou Qing kept crawling until he was where he was. Where is the blue cube that looks like the Chimera core? At that moment, the Chimera core is suddenly absorbed into his body. The system informs him that the Chimera Core has merged into his body and the final mission is open. His mission is to protect the Chimera Core and survive for 1 hour. Behind Zhou Qing appeared 2 users who had not expected that this goblin was still alive. After gaining new strength, Zhou Qing quickly jumped over the 2 people and slammed the 2 to the ground. And Zhou Qing absorbed the player's body. Finally, his body recovered completely. He already knew the power of the Chimera Core, thought about whether the monster's body can also merge into his body. So he came to the laboratory is still intact. There are several monsters locked up in the tube. Heading to a tube containing a fishman, and will use it as an experimental material, Zhou Qing breaks the tube and immediately merges with the fishman's body. Knowing this unique power, thought of a very interesting plan. Zhou Qing smashed all the tubes in there and absorbed all the monsters in it. His body got bigger, and 2 big horns appeared on his head. He was very happy with his new power, and also the duration. This mission is still long. Zhou Qing wants revenge on Luqian. At that time, several players appeared, who were instantly frightened by the sight of the monster in front of them, or Zhou Qing. Monsters? I'm not a monster. I'm a nightmare for you. That's what Zhou Qing said. He immediately slaughtered all the players there. After that, Zhou Qing immediately absorbed the player's body. Luqian, who was already there, was wondering where this monster came from and whether he was the one who caused this trouble. It seems you don't recognize me. It's only natural because I've changed a lot. Luqian finally found out that the goblin was the goblin he had previously killed. He asked what exactly happened to him. Zhou Qing said, "You don't need to know better, worry about yourself." At that time, the praying mantis had already attacked Zhou Qing, and Zhou Qing easily killed the locust. But he couldn't join forces with the locust due to a restriction, and it seemed this was the limit for goblins to grow. Knowing that technique, Luqian was sure that this goblin used a Chimera Core. Of course, this is an example of what a Chimera Core is. A Chimera Core has many weaknesses, while the first weakness can only be used by monsters, but the biggest weakness is, before speaking his words, he has already moved swiftly in front of Zhou Qing, and dealt a very strong punch. Zhou Qing, who was hit, was confused. What is the level of Luqian? In fact, Luqian is already behind him. He said that when facing high-level awakened players, it doesn't matter. No matter how much you improve, it will all be in vain. Luqian took out his dagger, and very quickly already dealt multiple slashes to Zhou Qing's body, accepting that Zhou Qing regretted being arrogant. He didn't expect this to be awaken, and no wonder his mission was ordered to only last for 1 hour, because he wouldn't be able to beat Luqian. Zhou Qing survived after recovering. This is one of the abilities of the dragon lizard, which has high regeneration. Luqian was happy to see that, and wanted to mutilate and examine Zhou Qing's body. Still standing, he immediately used Smoke Ghost's ability to emit a lot of smoke that wanted to hide and attack him silently. But that wasn't true. It was too much that against a strong enemy the only way to win was to flee. Zhou Qing had to run and buy time until his mission was completed. At that moment there were strange ropes binding Zhou Qing, and he could not move either. Zhou Qing was confused about why this rope was so strong, and what Luqian's profession actually was. Luqian didn't expect this goblin to run away, and said that it was the fate of this goblin to be hunted. The nails extended and directly thrust into Zhou Qing's stomach. It was a destructive poison and would have killed him with such great pain. But at that moment, Zhou Qing, who didn't want to die alone, had his body enlarged and instantly exploded himself. Luqian managed to survive the explosion, and his body was full of black liquid. The black liquid under his face made his skin peel off. Zhou Qing survived the explosion, and his form became very small, very happy to see Luqian's shattered face. "Your face is more handsome now." Luqian was very angry with that. Zhou Qing made his face ugly, and vowed to torture Zhou Qing more horrible than death. Hilton used skip at that time. Zhou Qing suddenly said, "Insect type and awakened player. I will remember your information, and when I find you, I will definitely kill you." He just laughed at the chattering of goblin in front of him, and he used his dagger again. Luqian immediately gave a strong language to split Zhou Qing's head, but it seemed to miss him. Zhou Qing was happy because he knew he had won, his time was up, and his mission of survival was successful. Before going back, he said, "Remember my words. I will see you again." After that, Zhou Qing returned to the previous place. He completed the mid-level mission and got the mysterious monster egg as well as this egg chimera fusion tool. I don't know what monsters will come out later, but there's a strong aura there and it needs warmth to incubate it. He was more pleased with the gift of the chimera fusion tool that could combine monsters and other creatures to develop into new species. Zhou Qing immediately came up with a good idea using this chimera core today. just as his dungeon burial area had finished repairs, meaning it had been 7 days before, and immediately entered dungeons. If you're looking for monsters, then the dungeon is your goal, and it's time to find out the use of Chimera Core items. He'll combine monsters here, and see what results he gets. Zhou Qing had 4 kinds of monsters in the dungeon. The weakest were zombies. There were also skeleton magicians who could use magic, then elite monsters, Suture, and the strongest boss, skeleton demon dragon. Zhou Qing tried to combine 2 zombies first. The 2 of them had merged and became stronger, muscular, and strong, but Zhou Qing still wanted to be even stronger. So he continued to combine all the zombies until he created a level 25 zombie king. Create, and this is already at the elite level. Zhou Qing tried to combine 2 zombie kings, but the fusion failed. It has already reached the highest level of fusion of monsters. So if the peak evolution of zombies to zombie king is the same as before, Zhou Qing, who became a goblin, he has absorbed a lot of players and monsters, but he finally can't evolve. Again, Zhou Qing tried again by combining structure and skeleton magics, and the result was General Suture Magisk level 30. Zhou Qing continued to combine the monsters he had. Skeleton magicians continued to combine, and he was sure they would become stronger, and the result he got the Chaos Evil Demon monster level 40. The demon race took the form of a giant with 3 horns and had wings. At that time the bone dragon descended towards him, because for Zhou Qing, the most important thing here was the bone dragon. What would happen if he combined these bone dragons? He has merged all the monsters, and there are only 4 zombie kings that can be combined with the bone dragon. At that time the system appears informing that a player has entered the dungeon. Zhou Qing is very happy, because he needs fusion materials for the bone dragon. Meanwhile, in another place there was a party that had entered the dungeon. The captain was sure that he could conquer it because previously Yanwu had made a raid strategy before. At that time from the smoke appeared a zombie. 2 people had advanced, but they were easily bounced off. They were surprised that it's not just a zombie. That's a zombie king. This captain is confused as to why there's a zombie king in this dungeon. The captain keeps advising them not to panic. But after seeing what appears next, it's not an ordinary monster Suture but a chaos evil demon race. The captain is terrified and already giving up on their lives. The group soon met their end. Zhou Qing was already there and was pleased with his huge bounty. Now it's time, let's join. At one night, there were several armored troops surrounding a man named Knox von Reinhaver, who they called Demon. With their weapons, they ran towards Knox to kill him, but at that time Knox resisted and ran towards them to attack. From behind Knox's body appeared 3 red eyes. When he managed to approach the troops, the eyes released extraordinary power that made Knox kill the troops blindly. In Knox's hand, there was a purple flame, which he then stomped on the ground until the ground cracked and released purple flames that burned the bodies of the armored troops. With just one attack, Knox managed to defeat and kill them horribly. Meanwhile, in his victory, Knox was so exhausted that fresh blood came out of his mouth. Although he won, he did not show his happy face at all, but his face was very sad, as if he regretted everything he had done. Knox, who was bowed limply, tried to get up. Then his gaze was reached after hearing someone's steps approaching him. Knox turned his head, and in front of him was a red-haired woman who looked at him sadly. The woman questioned why he made a deal with Devil and why he betrayed them. Knox was silent for a moment. He looked up at the sky and then his head bowed. He said that he was not the one who betrayed them, but they were the ones who had betrayed him. Hearing Knox's words, the woman became angry, but Knox only replied with a smile. Then suddenly a text appeared, if he had completed the first part of Inner Lunatic, and the total number of completions was 27. It was known if all of that was just a game played by a man. There was a man sitting in front of his computer and praising the game he had finished playing. But the conditions around his place look very messy, where there are so many papers scattered on his table and also so many cigarettes end. Although he was very satisfied with the game he was playing, but there was one thing that worried him, where on a calendar there was a date that he circled with a red ink pen showing his schedule to the hospital. It is known that the man named Yuchan was diagnosed with a short life expectancy. 2 years ago, he came to the hospital to get a checkup, but he unexpectedly had to get a bitter reality. At that time, Yuchan did not want to believe what the doctor at the hospital said, but after doing examinations at several other hospitals, the results were the same. He had terminal brain cancer. After receiving the unexpected illness, his life was ruined. He had no enthusiasm for life anymore. He confined himself at home until the garbage was piled up so much in his house. After 2 years passed, his condition worsened. After playing a game, he coughed until blood came out of his mouth. He looked at the blood on his palm sadly while muttering whether he would really die soon. But according to him, even though he kept thinking about it, the result would never change where he was destined to die soon. While contemplating his fate, his phone screen suddenly lit up and showed a message from the hospital trying to confirm the appointment for the examination he was going to do. After seeing that, he felt very sad because in his condition, there was no one he could talk to even after his memory was lost. No one contacted him, and he also did not know who he could contact. Clutching the blood-stained tissue tightly, he said that he couldn't go anywhere in his current state. He then became emotional after seeing the hospital appointment papers and church brochures in front of him and threw them into the air. His head hung limply, but he realized that there was one thing he could still do in his life, and that was play games. From his computer screen came a text about whether he wanted to start a new game. He then clicked yes and started filling in the user information starting with the character name. When he was about to write the character name, he was confused because he didn't know what character name he should use this time. After that, he began to choose traits where there were 2 choices, that is monosensitivity genius and swordsmanship and combat genius. It was explained that if he chose more than 2 genius traits, then he would get a penalty. Therefore, he was asked to choose 1 or less traits to avoid punishment. On his computer screen, it was written that his negative trait was terminally ill. After completing everything needed, he started the game. As he clicked on the game start button, a very bright blue light appeared on his computer screen, and his body shook so much that he felt like he was going to die right then and there. Then a notification appeared on his computer screen that his character creation had succeeded. His eyesight began to blur, and he muttered to himself that he thought he would get used to death. But at least he wanted to die the way he wanted. Shortly after, a notification appeared that the character name had been forcibly changed, and after some processing, the character setup was complete. Then a white-haired man was seen sleeping on his bed with irregular breathing. He then woke up and was surprised to see his surroundings looking unfamiliar. He got off his bed enveloped by a feeling of déjà vu. He walked slowly to the mirror, and after seeing his face, he realized that he, Yu-chan, had become a game character named Nox, the worst character in the game. Nox von Reinhaver is a member of the 3rd leading dark family in Inner Lunatic who is deeply connected to criminal organizations in the lunatic world. He's the youngest of the 5 children of the Reinhaver family. The Reinhaver family has been producing talented children who excel in magic and swordsmanship for centuries. But in his family, Nox was the only child who was not gifted. Because of this, Nox hated the world for his weakness and ended up making a forbidden contract with the devil. Thus, he became the worst villain in the Inner Lunatic story. Yu-chan, who still couldn't believe that he had become Nox, was still trying to believe that it was all just a dream. However, a tab containing information about his character and stat information appeared. He was shocked and surprised when he saw that his stamina stat was only 2. Not only that, he was also surprised when he saw his negative trait, which was the same as the character he had created before. He had no idea that he had created such a pathetic character, because in the real world he was terminally ill, and in this game he was too. He was stunned and began to understand the reason why all this happened. At first he wanted to make a character similar to himself, a terminally ill character who would soon die and have no one to rely on. Of course, he didn't expect that he would become that character. He was silent for a moment, and then he was surprised by another tab appearing to inform him that there was one unread message in the message box. He checked it, and from the message there was an inscription that greeted him as Yu-chan. He was surprised because how could this be known? The name Yu-chan is the name given by his parents whose whereabouts he does not know until now. He began to conjecture the identity of the person who sent him the message. He suspected that the person was someone who knew the past that was lost from his memory. Then there was another post that said, even though he didn't remember it, but still he had to say something to him. Even though it had been a long time since they had met, he praised Yu-chan's good work over the past 2 years and said that he deserved to be here. Then he also said, "Welcome back," which made Yu-chan even more confused. From what the person said, he guessed that the world he lived in before was not reality, but this place. He muttered to himself that all of this really didn't make sense. From the message he got, The person also said that he still couldn't tell his identity, but he hoped that he could help him. He told Yuchan to enter the Elydian Academy, to develop his powers, and as much as possible to stay close to the main story, because the real truth would be there, in that place. Knowing that Yuchan was curious and asked how it would end, but he realized that he should calm himself down first, because for now he had turned into the final boss character in the game called Inner Lunatic. He looked at the mirror while blessing that being close to the main story was no different from telling him to die. But if it was true that the real reality was Inner Lunatic, then he couldn't give up on getting his memory back, and he had to stay close to the main story as much as possible, until his memory returned, and then find a bright spot in this game. He was determined to survive no matter what, so he clenched his fist as a sign that the fire was burning within him. He even said he was willing to become the biggest villain if necessary. He smiled because he felt that his current self was not much different from his previous self. 2 years ago, when he lost his memory, he had been a patient with a severe illness from the start. Death could come to him at any time, so he spent his time filled with fear, wondering when death would come to him. The only thing that had changed were the conditions around him, but apparently this was a world he was quite familiar with. He then ordered the system to tell him his date of birth, and found out that he was born on February 4th, 1997. Knowing that, he realized that the time of his death had also changed. With a sigh, he said that he would start his 28th attempt. But when he was about to leave his room and open the door, his hand felt painful. Then a notification appeared if his negative trait was active, where he got a level 1 sprained wrist due to the effects of a minor illness. Therefore, it was requested that he get enough rest so that he could recover. Knowing that, he didn't expect that his body was fragile like glass. All the way outside of his room, he grumbled because of the weak body he had. Then, before long, he accidentally collided with a long-haired brown maid who was carrying a plate. As a result of the bump, the plate the maid was carrying fell over and broke. The maid complained in pain and prepared to scold the person who hit her. But she was surprised to see that the person who hit her was none other than Yuchan, who had now become Nox's young master. Nox looked at the maid and realized that he recognized the woman in front of him as Rona. Rona panicked and hurriedly apologized to him and begged him to forget the incident. In Nox's mind, even though Rona was a side character, but she always talked behind Nox's back, that was what he could remember about her. He couldn't believe that this woman in front of him was talking behind Nox's back with her innocent face. Nox approached Rona and said he would let her go just this once. He then showed his horrible face. Although Nox didn't continue his words anymore, Rona already understood his gaze. With a frightened expression, Rona nodded her head, a sign of understanding what Nox meant. After that, the atmosphere became silent. Nox looked at the faces of the other servants who were terrified to see him. He understood. For them, Nox was family trash. He didn't know how Nox could live his life all this time. Nox then planned to leave there, but his steps stopped when Rona asked where he was going at this early hour. Nox bluntly said that he was going to the training hall, which was greeted with surprised expressions by all the servants there. With a naughty smile, Nox asked Rona to come with him. Rona, who heard that, was shocked like being struck by lightning, because in her mind, Nox would beat her with a wooden sword. The two of them then walked towards the training hall. On the way there, Rona continued to bathe Nox from behind with a confused face. Meanwhile, Nox seemed to be preoccupied with his own thoughts, where for now he first had to survive, because after being in the presence of death, he became even more convinced that he actually still wanted to be able to live longer. In order to survive, he had to quickly adapt to his current environment. Holding his chin, he muttered to himself that he currently had no chance. As a pro who completed this game 27 times, he not only knew the secrets in this game, he then ordered to display the status window. Then in front of him appeared a tab that told information about Inner Lunatic, which was the demonic and the divine. Furthermore, it's a game where conflict with the Empire is the main focus, and has numerous fandoms around the world. What's special about Inner Lunatic is that each character has various growth paths with countless trait combinations. There are many low-level traits that is rare and common to choose from, while there are also genius traits, of which only one can be applied in practice. The genius trait made it easier for him to reach the top of the chosen field, but he chose 2 traits. That's because there is a feature called trait punishment in this game, a system that applies increasingly large punishments if the selected trait exceeds the limit. That's why he could choose 2 genius traits, swordsmanship and combat genius, specializing in the use of swords and other sharp weapons. This trait can help him to reach the peak of martial arts. Then the second is Mana Sensitivity Genius, increasing sensitivity to magic. This trait can help him to achieve maximum efficiency in circulating mana. But there are still many other more useful things, namely the Eye of Discernment, which allows him to see the status window of other characters for the user's benefit. Then Master of Acting, as the name suggests. It can help him be proficient in acting. Then Steel Mentality will also help him not to be afraid in battle or in dangerous situations. Thinking about it all made Nox so dizzy that he ruffled his hair, while Rona, who saw the strange behavior shown by the young master in front of her, felt confused. After thinking about several things that made his head hurt, Nox also planned for now he would deal with it one by one. Then, after a long walk, the two of them arrived at the practice hall. While opening the gates of the hall, in his mind, all he had to do was first he had to get rid of the curse of languishment first, a powerful innate curse of suffering, which was implanted in the player's body. Although the growth rate was reduced by half, the player was twice as vulnerable to enemy debuffs. While holding the wooden sword, Nox said that no matter how many times he thought about it, he only had one conclusion: that his body was really weak right now. Just a few times he swung his sword, sweat was already pouring out of his body, and he was getting so weak that the sword he was holding slipped out and his body fell to the floor. He didn't expect that this curse of languishment was a curse that drained his strength. After resting for a long time, he tried to move his body, still in the place where he fell earlier. He sat down and looked around the hall filled with well-maintained weapons. He thought it must be because the Reinhaver family's foundation was in swords. Among the various powerful noble families, what set the Reinhaver family apart from other families and caused them to become famous was their skill in swords and the element of darkness. Their swordsmanship was known to infuse their swords with the power of darkness and could allow them to slice through enemies with ease. In addition, because of their leader's sword, the weapon called the Dark Sword of Force will only be given to the successor, who becomes the next head of the family. With a confused look on his face, Nox wondered if it had anything to do with him. Their advantages were not just their swordplay. Being part of this family also had many benefits, one of which was money. The Reinhaver family was arguably the best family in the world, which meant they had so much money piled up. Even they are still willing to give a large amount of money to their trashy youngest son, Nox said to himself while sighing. Nox's father, Theo, probably wouldn't care if Nox spent money, however. He wanted because Nox was a character who was always given all kinds of things. As the youngest son of a reputable family scum, it was obvious that Nox was a character who would spend a lot of money. Nox then tried to stand up, but because his body was weak, his legs were shaking from holding his body up. But even so, he wouldn't be able to run away before the thing he had asked Rona for was done. A few minutes earlier, just as Nox was about to do his training, Rona delivered the wooden sword, towel, and water for him. After making sure there was no one but the two of them, Nox asked Rona to stand closer to him. Rona was scared because she thought Nox would hit her. Seeing the excessive behavior shown by Rona, Nox became annoyed because even though he had absolutely no such malicious intentions, Nox then pulled Rona's ear to get closer to him. Then he whispered something to her. Rona was surprised when she found out about what he ordered her. Rona refused the order and said that she would pretend not to hear what Nox said. Nox was very upset and clenched his fists while asking Rona not to say anything and told her to immediately do what he ordered. Seeing Nox about to hit her, Rona had no choice but to do as Nox told her, so she left. In Nox's mind, he said that he didn't know how well Rona could carry out the task, but if she could carry it out quickly, she could definitely bring it tomorrow. Nox then walked towards the drinking water brought by Rona and drank it. While drinking, he thought about how he could solve the problem of the curse and his low energy. While busy with his thoughts, he was surprised by a man who was standing behind him and greeted him. Nox was surprised because the man was the butler named Rotwell de Hernerock. He was the real power holder of the Reinhaver family, and someone he couldn't mess with. Besides being the butler, he was also the right hand of the head of the family, who was none other than Nox's father, Theo von Reinhaver. At the sight of Rotwell, the hand that was holding the cup immediately trembled, as he did not expect such a difficult person to deal with to appear so quickly. From what he knew, Rotwell was a person who usually would not care about the youngest son of trash in the Reinhaver family. His behavior made Nox wonder the reason why he approached him. After putting down the cup he was holding, Nox then asked what the family butler was doing in a place like this, Then suddenly a notification appeared that the positive trait, Master of Acting, was currently active. Rotwell replied that he had been assigned by Knox's father to deliver news to him. Seeing Knox's confused face, Rotwell explained that Knox's father had insisted that he join him for dinner tonight. Knox panicked as he knew absolutely nothing, considering he had just transmigrated. Not wanting to take any chances, he asked Rotwell to tell his father that he would not be joining him for dinner tonight. Knox felt it was all too sudden, and did not expect his father to invite him to dinner. Investigating, from Rotwell's explanation again, it was known that the young lady from the Steelenor family had visited, where she came to attend night's study. Then if he didn't attend, Knox's father would be very angry. Knox was silent, and finally he couldn't help but accept the order. Rotwell then looked at Knox's face closely and said that Knox didn't look like his usual self today. Knox was shocked and panicked after hearing that, but as much as possible, he tried to act normal. Rotwell said that Knox usually didn't like swinging a sword. He was surprised to see Knox in the hall today practicing, and he asked about the reason why Knox was doing that. With a cold stare, Knox answered the question casually. He said the only thing he would tell him was how brazenly a common servant like himself interfered with his master's business. No matter what he did or why he did it, it was none of his business, as he was the only one who decided what he did. Hearing that, Rotwell apologized, and then Knox left him alone. As Knox left, Rotwell muttered to himself about whether Knox knew something and whether he should report this to the head of the family. After his meeting with Rotwell, Knox returned to his room, and when he got there, his face was both relieved and tense because he did not expect such a thing to happen. Not knowing what would happen if he was caught transmigrating, he looked behind him to make sure no one was following him. He then wondered why the young lady of the Steelenor family appeared suddenly like that. In the evening, when dinner was served, Knox, who was seated at the dining table, was severely criticized by his twin brothers for his presence in the dining room. One of his twin brothers asked if he still had ties to the family, and the question was answered by his twin brother with a mocking laugh, while saying that he did not expect to see his face there, and said that Knox was completely shameless. His twin brother also started gossiping about him being said to have beaten up a maid. Knox, hearing all this, could only remain silent and defend himself in his heart that it was not him who did it. Not long after, the dining room door opened, and a man appeared who was none other than Theo von Reinhover, Knox's father. Not only alone, next to him stood a beautiful red-haired woman named Thalia von Steelenor, the young lady of the Steelenor family. After Thalia introduced herself, Knox's father explained about her arrival there, which was to attend night's lesson for a while. Knox's father also asked them all to welcome Thalia with a warm welcome. From what Knox knew, Thalia was a side character in Inner Lunatic, a character who punished the antagonist, Knox. That means she is the one who will stab him in the chest in the future. Knox's father, who saw his presence, did not expect him to attend the dinner. Knox turned his face away because he felt awkward, while Thalia looked confused by the situation. Since everyone was already there, Knox's father invited them to eat immediately. After finishing their main course, this time there seemed to be an important announcement. It could be seen from the gestures shown by Knox's twin brother, who had been watching him while laughing. One of his twin brothers opened the conversation by asking his father to make a decision on who would be admitted to the Elydian Academy and become the family's new talent. Knox looked surprised to hear it while his father seemed to be thinking about it. As is known, the Elydian Academy is the most important place in Inner Lunatic, because Inner Lunatic depicts the story of the cadres fighting demons in various unexpected situations at the Academy. Knox showed a face full of worry because when he had just arrived there, he had been given orders to enter the Academy. Knox's father then said as they all knew that there were only 3 invitations given to each family to enter the Elydian Academy, the reason was to protect the Academy from the power of the nobles. 2 of the 3 invitations had been used for his first and second sons. Therefore, currently, the Reinhover family only had 1 invitation left. Knox's face grew tense. Then his father began to say that he had to choose who would go there based on their family tradition. Knox replied to his father's words by saying that what his father meant was that the 3 of them would fight to decide who would go to the academy. Hearing Knox's words, his father was surprised and did not expect that Knox would speak first. Knox's father then confirmed Knox's words and said that it would all be decided in a month, where he would decide who would go after seeing them compete at the training ground. After that conversation, his twin brothers began to mock him and told him to give up immediately because in his very weak body condition, it was unlikely that he could fight with the two of them. The words of his twin brothers did not discourage Nox, but he bluntly said that the words spoken by the two of them should only be said after they won. Both twin brothers became angry after hearing Nox's words, but Nox did not care at all. While looking at the glass of wine in his hand, Nox became even more excited because he thought this duel would be the gateway for him to enter the academy. Then looking at his twin brothers, Nox firmly said that he would be the one to enter the Elydian Academy. His father and siblings seemed surprised by Nox's uncharacteristic behavior in front of them. Meanwhile, amidst the commotion in the Reinhaver family, Thalia was amazed by his confidence. Nox was surprised as he felt like he was getting attention from someone he shouldn't have. In Nox's father's workroom, Rotwell was seen reporting on Nox's suddenly changed habits. In the mind of Nox's father, he did not believe Rotwell's words before he saw it himself. He felt that Nox's heart had changed, and began to worry that Nox was possessed by demon. Therefore, he asked Rotwell to keep an eye on Nox. Meanwhile, on the other hand, many maids were whispering about Nox coming to the training ground again. They didn't seem to expect what they saw, but they understood that he must have done it because of the competition that would be held in a month. They also asked why Nox was only running at the training ground. Nox immediately turned to them in annoyance because he could hear them gossiping very clearly. After running for a long time, the gossipers told him that his stamina had increased by 0.1. Nox was surprised because after the grueling training, his stamina only increased by that much. Nox tried hard to increase his physical strength because the requirement to activate sword and martial arts genius was that the physical strength value had to be 4. Unless one's stamina was as low as Nox's, they would start to unlock everything. But Nox is currently afflicted with the curse of languishment, for which he must increase his stamina by 1.9 a month. The curse of languishment, a curse that halved his physical growth. Even after Nox was exhausted like he was about to die after a run, he only got an increase of 0.1. His terminally ill trait also halved his physical growth, making Nox have to try 4 times harder than others. However, no matter how hard he tried, because he had the terminally ill trait, he could only increase his stamina to 15. Shortly in the middle of his training, he was surprised by Rona, who suddenly came calling him to inform him that she had brought the items he had requested yesterday. Nox smiled happily as Rona was more dexterous than he thought, and praised her good work. From what he ordered, Rona managed to bring several items such as 3-headed serpent's poison, fairy's spring water, golem's core, and rapid physical growth scroll. Looking at the items in front of him, Nox was confident that after this he would have no more problems, were of course a pro who used the old-fashioned way. After getting the items, Rona asked Nox why he needed all of them, because according to her, all the items were poisonous, difficult to use. Even those were also medicines that people usually avoided, and only the scroll was what she thought was still useful for him. Nox answered seriously. He explained that they all avoided it because they didn't know how to use it. Rona was then surprised and confused. Then to answer Rona's confusion, Nox took the 3-headed serpent's poison and drank it all at once. Rona panicked, because from what she knew, the 3-headed serpent's poison was poisonous. This was indeed not denied by Nox, where he realized it all. After drinking it, a notification appeared if his current stamina would increase by 1.5 temporarily, and the countdown started from now on. Nox felt sweat flowing so much on his body, making Rona become worried, and tried to call the other servants, but the action was stopped by Nox. Then Nox ate the golem's core, making Rona even more shocked because she thought Nox was wrong to eat it like that. Then after that, another notification appeared, saying that Nox would enter a hardened state, and the hidden part had been opened where all of that happened because the 3-headed serpent's poison reacted to the golem's core. Seeing that, Nox was very happy, because it turned out that his hidden part was working, and he just needed to continue the action, even though his condition did not look good at the moment. It was known that the original golem's core could make humans temporarily hardened to strengthen their defenses. It was an item used to make artificial golems, but if the item was used together with the 3-headed serpent's poison, then there would be a special effect activated, and the great thing was that the negative trait, curse of languishment, would disappear. Nox smiled satisfied with what he did, even though there were no more hidden parts to open. Meanwhile, Rona looked still panicked, and while asking about Nox's condition, then shortly Nox suddenly opened his shirt to make Rona shocked and blush to see it all. The next step, Nox took Fairy's spring water and spilled it on his head, and the water flowed into his body, making the core golem effect disappear. Nox smiled and said to himself that it was a very interesting feeling, after which a notification appeared telling him that a secret piece had been found. The player was temporarily given the blessed growth trait. Nox, for the umpteenth time, smiled happily because the plan went according to what he expected, where the blessed growth trait would double the player's stat growth rate until stamina reached 5. Then the last step, Nox took the rapid physical growth scroll, then opened and tore it, making him successfully increase his stamina growth by 100%. After doing all that, it was certain that Nox had managed to get rid of his curse. With blessed growth, he had reduced the 50% physical growth penalty of the terminally ill. He had even used the scroll. As a result, his growth would be twice as fast as before. He began to wonder if he should increase his stamina now. He clenched his fists, preparing for his next action. But suddenly he was surprised by Rona, who started hugging him suddenly. With tears in her eyes, Rona looked worried about Nox's current condition, where when he undressed after drinking the poison, she thought that Nox was crazy. Nox was surprised by her words. To stop her nonsense, he quickly asked Rona to get a towel for him, but Rona was still silent with tears falling down her cheeks. Looking at Rona's face, Nox said to himself that since he managed to lift the curse, then he would let Rona be this time. In order for Rona not to worry too much about him anymore, he answered Rona's question by saying that his current condition was certainly fine. But that didn't make Rona calm down, and offered Nox to call Butler. Nox smiled at Rona to reassure her that he was really okay. After calming down enough, Rona asked Nox if there were any other tasks Nox wanted to give her. Nox replied with a smile and told her to run. Sure enough, after Nox's affirming action, the two of them ran around the field together. From a distance, there was someone looking at the two of them, and that person was none other than Thalia. Seeing Nox desperately trying to train, she wondered why such a weak child would agree to compete with his brothers. Thalia's maid, Emma, immediately warned her not to underestimate the youngest son of the Reinhaver family, because her words were not worth saying. But Emma's words were immediately denied because she thought what she said was not wrong, because Nox could not even hold a sword, so all he did was run without caring about anything. In addition, when Reinhaver's troops offered to teach him swordmanship, Nox refused, and he was sure that next month Nox would be beaten to a pulp. Thalia knew it would all happen, but she couldn't stop worrying about him. Because of her uneasy feelings, she said goodbye to Emma to go out to see Nox. When she approached Nox, he looked very tired after running for a long time. Thalia then approached him and reintroduced herself. Nox, who saw Thalia, could not say anything. In his mind, he was actually very surprised by Thalia, who came to him. Nox then asked Thalia curtly about her purpose in coming to him. Thalia was surprised by the cold attitude shown by Nox, but she tried to think positively. Maybe it was all because Nox was surprised to see her beautiful face. Thalia then asked Nox if he was practicing now, because he thought he could win from his brothers. Nox nodded, making Thalia even more curious about whether Nox thought he could win by just running like that. Rona, who heard their conversation, agreed with everything Thalia said. After that, Thalia offered to help him, but her offer was flatly rejected by Nox, and then told her to leave from there, making Thalia not expect to be rejected like that. Thalia then became very angry because of Nox's attitude towards her, while Rona looked panicked because with his nature like that, the girls would hate him. Thalia crashed into Nox's body and left there upset. Seeing Thalia's behavior made Nox confused. Then he tried to see Thalia's profile. From what he saw, Thalia apparently had an extraordinary talent, an inner lunatic. Usually the average stamina of an adult was only 4, but seeing her stamina at 6 made Nox impressed. He began to think, even though she didn't have as much potential as 3 sword emperors or 4 continental sages, but her potential was enough to reach a level below them, even enough to kill 1 or 2 demons. Moreover, the fire attribute he saw in her profile would later rise as white flames and burn Nox, who had become a demon, to death. If he made Thalia his partner now, then many future events would be messy. That couldn't happen because he needed to stay as close as possible to the main story to avoid death. After all, it made sense to get close to someone who would eventually kill him. 1 month had passed. Thalia was seen walking in the Reinhaver family residence. Her face looked very sad because she remembered the times when she was training, where many people admired her prowess because she could understand sword techniques quickly, So many praised her that she deserved to be a member of the Steelenor family. Even so, until now as a member of the Steelenor family that people were proud of, she had never managed to defeat her older sister. Because of this, she began to doubt whether she could become a knight. Since ancient times, knights were individuals who would not be swayed by greed. They lived frugally with one goal in mind, which was to sacrifice themselves in the name of justice. Because of this mindset, one can only become a knight after learning many sword arts and techniques. She then began to think of Nox, wondering how he could beat his brothers with just physical training while his brothers had been training for their entire lives. Thalia felt it was impossible for Nox to beat them. The next day when the competition took place, Nox was seen facing off against one of his brothers named Alain. The fight was witnessed by the Reinhaver family servants and soldiers as well as by Nox's father, then his first wife Priscilla, Rotwell, and also Thalia. With a sharp look, Nox's father asked Rotwell about his opinion on the fight. Then it was heard that the battle for the right to enter the Elydian Academy was about to begin. After getting the signal if the fight started, his brother immediately tried to attack him. With an arrogant look, he swung his sword towards Nox. Before the event began, after Nox's father asked Rotwell what he thought about the fight between the two sons, Rotwell replied that, based on what he had seen before, young Master Alain would win. His opinion was immediately agreed by Nox's father, who also thought like him. After that, Rotwell muttered that he was very curious if the head of the family had anticipated if the outcome of the fight was different from what they thought. He then looked at Nox and thought that although it was true that Nox had changed, but he didn't get the impression that he would win, because it was so outrageous and impossible. According to him, he had also previously walked the path of a knight, fighting on the side of the head of the family. The sword was something that was sometimes complicated, but sometimes it was also the simplest thing in the world. No matter how long one had practiced and how much one had internalized it, there was only one thing that could turn everything upside down and bring the stronger man to his knees, and that was the genius of a different world, as in an abundance of talent. He wondered if Nox was born with such talent. While stunned at the sight of Nox, he was surprised by the voice of the head of the family, who said that it wasn't that Nox didn't have potential, because with the blood of the Reinhaver family in his veins, there could be a possibility if a brat had been born with potential as great as the 3 sword emperors. Meanwhile, in the battle area, Nox was a little worried because his swordmanship and combat genius were inactive. He did not expect that on this most important day, luck would not be on his side. Because from the results of the training he had done so far, he in the end still could not raise his stamina to 4, which was probably currently at 3.8. While doing exercises by running, Rona, who was with him, kept complaining about whether she should keep running with him. Nox replied that as his maid, if she didn't run with him, then who else would help him? Nox then handed his towel to Rona, and she received it with a resentful look. He knew she was cursing him in her heart, but she denied it, saying that the look was because she accidentally bit her tongue. After seeing Rona's funny behavior because he teased her, Nox began to think again. By doing this much training, his stamina should have reached what it should be. He then looked at his stamina status through the eye of discernment. But he was disappointed because after the hard training he did, his stamina was only 4.5. Even side characters like Rona had a higher stat than him. Nox became silent, lamenting his fate. Then Rona invited him to return to the house because soon the sky began to darken, and she reminded Nox that he had to rest because tomorrow was his competition day. Realizing this, Nox was upset that the results were not what he expected, and that his training time was lacking. On the day of his fight against Alain, he was severely mocked by his brother, and asked to give up the competition immediately. According to him, although Nox was a burden on the family, he was still his little brother, so he did not want to attack Nox excessively. Hearing his brother's words and behavior, Nox was sure that he was not really sincere in saying all that, because what he really wanted was for Nox to give up. Alain laughed because what Nox said was true. He said it also because he only wanted to look good in front of the young lady of the Steelenor family. Nox then looked at his brother's stamina and found out that his stamina was at 8, making it unlikely that he could win in a normal way. Before the match started, Nox and Alain were reminded that in this competition, they had to accept whatever the result of the match was, and not to oppose it. Nox's face looked very nervous. He said that if he lost this match, then it was impossible for him to restore his memory and find out who sent the letter. Even if he got a year's suspension, his life would be completely over. The match began. Alan unceremoniously ran towards while swinging his sword. The attack was lucky to be avoided by Nox. The action was praised by his brother. But Alan did not remain silent. He advanced towards Nox and began to attack him again. While he was being attacked, Nox thought that if he lost, then it meant he had to give up everything. But if he could win, then he felt like he could get everything in his grasp, Nox said as he smiled towards his brother. Then came the notification that Nox's stamina increased by 0.1. Meanwhile, Alan, who heard Nox's words, looked confused and said whether his attack was too strong and made him stupid. Alan continued to attack Nox, but this time his attacks looked a little brutal. Seeing Nox struggling under the onslaught, Priscilla smiled from a distance as she felt she had been worried for no reason after hearing that the youngest had changed. She was confident that in the end, the last child of the Reinhaver family to enter the Elydian Academy would be her son. Nox's father, on the other hand, who was watching the match, saw Nox as a very pitiful man. Hearing that comment from her husband made her smile slyly while saying to herself that one day the Reinhaver family would be able to dominate her. Nox's father then told Rotwell that he was really looking forward to seeing Nox at his best, as he felt he had changed. Rotwell offered to stop the match, because if the match was allowed to continue, then Nox would take a long time to recover. Nox's father was still staring at the match. He knew his two twins, Alan and Hartz, had good skills, but they were not at the level of "they're like an uncut gem." Compared to Garen, his eldest son, their abilities were clearly far behind. The rule of might of the Black Sword, which subdues everything under its feet and makes its enemies kneel with its great power. Seeing Nox panting, Nox's father could only sigh and think just who in this world can he be taught from. Nox's father then got up from his seat and asked Rotwell to stop the match immediately. Meanwhile, Nox was still trying to withstand Alan's attacks until he managed to increase his stamina again. Then suddenly, a notification appeared that the swordsmanship and combat genius characteristics had been activated. Nox, while lowering his head, smiled with satisfaction. Seeing Nox's behavior, Alan laughed and said that right now Nox had lost his mind and was going crazy. Then the notification reappeared that the time stream genius skill had been used. Nox's strange behavior caught his father by surprise, and from behind Nox's body, a clock-shaped circle of yellow light appeared around him. As he looked at the people around him, Nox muttered that he had heard a saying that geniuses and ordinary people lived in different worlds. By using Genius Time Stream, everything seemed to move slowly, a skill that made time run many times slower. The enemy in front of him will look slower, in contrast to him who is moving fast. Although it was very difficult to use this skill to its full potential, as long as the swordsmanship and combat genius characteristics were active, then it was certain that he would easily read the enemy's movements. With that ability, Nox managed to read the movement of his brother's attack. He attacked and managed to make his brother's sword thrown away. Alan was clearly surprised by what he experienced at the moment, while Nox smiled triumphantly at him. Nox's attack not only knocked his brother's sword away, but also made his wrist hurt. Alan showed his anger towards Nox, while Nox looked relieved that he could finally attack his brother. But Nox realized that he must not let his guard down because his skill could only last for 5 minutes. Therefore, as soon as possible, he had to end the match within that period of time. Nox then told Alan that in the beginning he just wanted to play with him, but this time he was bored and wanted to end it all as soon as possible. In addition, he said that both of his brothers could attack him at the same time, making both of his brothers surprised. Nox then asked his father for permission to fight his two brothers together, making the whole hall surprised to hear his request. Nox's father then smiled. He felt that at this time Nox's aura had changed, and felt like there was something he was hiding. Therefore he thought he should watch him a little longer. Then Nox's father agreed to Nox's request, but his wife didn't seem to agree. Even so, the match restarted with Nox now fighting both of his brothers simultaneously. Both twin brothers were furious that Nox had humiliated them both in front of their father. But Nox ignored them and remained calmly holding his sword, preparing to start the match again. Then, without further ado, the two brothers attacked Nox simultaneously. But Nox managed to parry both of their attacks with ease. Although the two brothers had worked together to defeat him, Nox's speed made it difficult for them both to deal with him. Then Nox's mastery of underground lower sword art increased, thanks to the special effects of Genius Time Stream. Nox looked very satisfied with his achievement. He then continued to parry the attacks of his two brothers. After many attacks, neither of them could touch Nox's body. While his brothers were busy trying to attack Nox, their bodies collided with each other. The two brothers glanced at Nox, and Nox could read the expressions shown by the two brothers where they must have thought how could Nox, who was a disgrace to the family, could change so drastically. While his siblings were strategizing, Nox knew that and wouldn't let them chat in the middle of their match. Previously, Nox had only defended against his brothers' attacks, but now the time was right for Nox to turn to attack them both. Nox swung his sword at his two brothers, causing them both to be cornered and fall down due to his attacks. Just as Nox defeated them both, the duration of his genius time stream also ended. Seeing the two twins fall, their mother called their names in worry. Meanwhile, Nox was visibly relieved after the referee announced that the match was won by him. His brother's face looked very upset because he did not expect him to be defeated by his younger brother, who had been called the scum of the family. Nox then dropped his sword. He glanced at his father with an awkward smile. After the match was over, Nox excused himself and left the arena. Thalia, who saw Nox leave, tried to catch up with him. Outside the hall, Nox looked very tired, and on his hand there was a spot of blood coming from his nose. It was because he overexerted himself with the duration of his skill. The time stream genius skill actually has one big disadvantage. If used past the time limit, then he will be affected by the rebound debuff effect, making Nox's life now reduced by 2 days 17 hours. More clearly, the effect of this skill is to take his life permanently. It is the worst debuff that makes him easily fall ill. Plus, he already had a severe illness. But it was fortunate that the effect didn't happen in front of people, because if caught by even one person, his enrollment to the academy would definitely be cancelled. But while grateful for it all, he was surprised by Thalia, who came to him and found out that he was currently injured. Nox was shocked, not expecting that he would be found out so soon. Plus, of all the people there, Thalia was the one who knew about it. After all, his father must not know the side effects of this skill. Seeing Thalia, Nox was about to scold her, but before he could speak, Thalia said that she didn't think Nox could defeat his brother with his weak body. Nox became astonished. Then, with a blushing face, Thalia continued to say again that she felt that she had misunderstood him. For the past month, Thalia had seen Nox practicing, during which time she had never once seen Nox hold a sword in his hand. On the first day, Nox only swung the sword a few times with poor posture. It was obvious that there would be many people who did not believe he could win a sword match. But looking at him now, it was clear that Nox was a talented kid. Earlier in the day, when the match ended and Nox left the hall, Thalia tried to catch up with him to ask him how he could develop his talent and how he could improve his skills. But after finding Nox, she didn't expect to see Nox in pain. She didn't expect the weak man standing in front of her right now to be the man who won the match with his amazing talent. He knew Nox wasn't a braggart like the rumors said. He was just training hard so he could win at any cost. Seeing Nox endure the pain, Thalia became worried, and her hand tried to reach Nox, but Nox rudely brushed Thalia's hand away from touching him. Nox was surprised by his rude behavior towards women. He believed that his attitude was because for the past 2 years, he had only stayed in the room and played games, making it difficult for him to communicate with others. Thalia, with a sad look on her face, apologized to Nox for being presumptuous in trying to touch him. Although Nox felt guilty for Thalia, he still rudely asked her the purpose of her looking for him. Thalia, with a weak voice, said that she didn't know that Nox was apparently seriously practicing his sword skills, because from what she heard, he was born with a weak body. Therefore, Nox only practiced his stamina. Thalia apologized for misunderstanding Nox and said that he must have unknowingly made a mistake by acting like a loudmouth. But according to her maid, Emma, anyone could make such a mistake. Hearing those words, Nox was confused about how to respond to Thalia's words. He knew Thalia was an honest person, just like what he saw in the game. Although she was a child who had a knightly nature, she was the child of a nobleman who had a good reputation. It must not be easy for her to admit her mistakes in front of others. Nox finally answered Thalia's words by saying that if Thalia thought like that, then he asked her not to tell anyone that her nose was bleeding. Thalia immediately answered with confidence and promised not to tell the incident she saw earlier. Hearing her answer, Nox felt relieved because it seemed like he didn't have to worry about her anymore. Nox left while telling Thalia to keep her promise. Thalia also saw Nox's departure with a red face that blushed. In the evening, in Nox's father's study, he spoke to Rotwell that it seemed his prediction was correct about Nox's talent. He then asked Rotwell what he thought about it. Rotwell replied that he still didn't understand at first because Knox was only on the receiving end, but at his age now he was convinced that Knox was the best among children his age. Knox's father agreed with his opinion. While holding his chin up, he said that he wasn't sure why he felt that way, but he believed that Knox was still hiding his talent. Therefore, Knox's father asked Rotwell to keep an eye on his every move, but he could only watch what he did, and Rotwell immediately agreed. Knox's father looked increasingly curious about Knox's talent, and wondered silently if Knox had the talent to inherit the power of the Black Sword. Clenching his fist, Knox's father told Rotwell that he didn't have much time. As someone who had an important role in this, Rotwell promised he would do his best. Meanwhile, in Knox's room, a tab appeared in front of him and informed him that he had completed the tutorial quest where he was told to win his first battle. Seeing the tab that always appears, Knox is surprised because even though it is said that this is a world that becomes reality, the system like this game still exists. Then after completing the quest, Knox got a reward where he got 3 stats distribution tickets for free. Knox was initially happy with that, but he turned into annoyed because he should have been given the reward earlier so that he wouldn't be too tired of running for a whole month just to increase his stamina to 2. He then opened the status window and looked for which stats he should increase. It wasn't stamina that was increased, but this time he chose the luck stat. The reason was because this was a stat that could not be raised by his own efforts. The value of luck stats was much higher than anything in Inner Lunatic. To confirm the truth, Knox tried to check it. Then a notification appeared that Knox would be given the privilege of completing several rounds, namely 27 times. He got 1 random traits gacha ticket. Knox was surprised that even the system benefit was still there, and he decided to immediately draw it. Soon a very large gacha tool appeared in front of him, making Knox feel a little strange, because he saw it directly with his own eyes, where he usually only saw it when playing games. Knox then immediately drew it. According to him, when he maximized the luck stat, there was a 95% chance he would get intermediate or higher. In gacha, there are several color levels: gray for below low grade, silver for intermediate grade, gold for high grade, while rainbow color for highest grade. Knox silently hoped that he would get a gold or higher grade item. The gacha ball then came out, and when he opened it, it contained a gold-colored paper scroll. When he opened the paper, he got the high-grade traits, Power of the Supreme. Knox looked very happy and did not expect to get that. Then information appeared regarding the trait where the traits were useful for reducing the opponent's aggregate stat by 20%, when Knox had a lower total stat than them. With sparkling eyes, Knox did not expect such a debuff skill to appear. He then remembered that he still had rewards left, namely skill confirmation tickets. The skill he would get from there was already determined, one of the hidden pieces that could be obtained from the Reinhaver family. To get it, he felt that he really needed that skill. He knew his father would soon call his older siblings to the residence, and it would be useful there. But now that he thought about it, wouldn't it be a while before Grayan, his second brother, would return home after a long time since the graduation of the Elydian Academy? To fulfill his duty as a knight, he went on a journey. Knox became dizzy as he had to think of many things, starting from the peace, then now, grain. But even though he seemed to have been deprived of rest, at least now he no longer had to worry about Thalia. He was sure she wasn't a character who would break her promise, especially since there was no reason for her to approach him again. Having just said that last night, the next morning Thalia again met him. Knox looked desperate because he thought their business was over yesterday. Knox also asked Thalia what else she wanted from him. Thalia stammeringly answered Knox's question that she wanted Knox to teach her to get stronger quickly like him. Knox was silent for a moment because he was confused about the answer, but then he said that he knew that during this month-long training, Thalia had always peeked and watched him while training. Thalia was surprised to hear the words peeking from Knox's mouth. She hurriedly tried to catch up with Knox, who tried to leave from there. Thalia tried hard to persuade him to at least teach her how to train like him. Seeing Thalia trying so hard, Knox realized that Thalia was doing it all because she really wanted to be recognized by her sister. Knox then turned to Thalia and said before she asked him for that or even thought about practicing, "Think about the abilities she had." Thalia looked at Knox, making him feel awkward because he had never chased someone. Knox asked Thalia not to compare herself to other people, and then left Thalia, who was stunned after hearing his words. Thalia felt sad because again Knox left her just like that. Meanwhile, after Knox managed to avoid Thalia, He looked back several times to check whether Thalia was chasing him or not. He thought that for a girl who would eventually kill him, he didn't need to show her how he got the hidden pieces. Not far from where Knox was, his father was watching his strange behavior. Knox arrived at the Reinhaver family's stables, which was one of the 3 places on the continent that kept famous horses. There he met his father, Rotwell, and his siblings. As Knox had expected, today his father would tell them to choose the horse they would ride for the rest of their lives. Horses in the inner lunatic, not only for the Reinhaver family, but horses were sacred beasts for the entire continent. If one wanted to become a knight or a mage, they had to choose one horse in their childhood. Then that horse will be their partner for life. While the Eludian Academy also teaches horsemanship separately, there are many big battles in the second part of the game's storyline. So once their horse died, then they had to raise it again from scratch. Moreover, teleportation magic was very expensive. That's why horses became a very important transportation suggestion. Knox was determined he had to choose the best horse there. As the winner of the competition, his father gave him the opportunity to choose the horse he wanted first. Looking at his 2 older siblings who were jealous of him, Knox looked at them while giving a smile full of satisfaction. Knox entered the stables, and his father waited to see which horse his youngest son would choose. There were so many cute and nice horses, but that wasn't the horse he was looking for. His gaze fell on one of the gray horses nearby, and he chose it as his horse. His choice did not get a good response from his father or older siblings, so his father gave him one more chance to choose a horse. Knox also realized that in everyone's eyes his choice was wrong, but from the stats he saw through the eye of discernment, the horse had a higher grade rank. Basically, summon beasts were divided into various ranks. As they grew, one could try to raise them to a higher rank. In other words, it meant that he could make the horse reach the highest rank. Besides, the horse he chose was of the obsidian race, which meant black stone. They were the most valuable race among other races. In his heart, Knox muttered that if they knew the horse's race, surely his father would immediately choose it. But right now he didn't look good because he was still weak. But somehow this was much more than the limit. Then Knox confidently told his father that he would not change his decision and still choose the horse. Knox believed that with the knowledge he had, he would be able to save the horse. Knox's father showed his dislike towards Knox for making such a choice. Knox's father suspected that he did it because Knox felt that the horse was like him, weak. He was very disappointed because in the end, Knox was just a weak child who needed love. Knox's father warned him not to regret his choice later, and left. His twin brothers protested because when it was their turn to choose a horse, their father left them. Meanwhile, Knox began to wonder if his choice was a disappointment. While he was daydreaming about it, he was surprised by Rotwell, who asked him to choose a name for his horse. Knox was quite confused. He was stunned for a long time, and finally found a suitable name for his horse, Carl. It was the name he used every time he finished Inner Lunatic, and it meant a lot to him. After choosing and naming his horse, Knox took him to his room because there was no way he could show people what he was going to do to Carl. He then looked at Carl's bright eyes, like eyes that still showed a desire to continue living just like him. He then called Rona's name, who had been outside his room. Rona was so surprised that she fell and made a mess of her cleaning equipment. When she entered Knox's room, she was surprised to see a horse on his bed. Rona showed her annoyed face because, of course, the one who would clean the place was her. Knox just laughed at Rona's grumbling and asked her to take care of Carl. At first, Rona was upset, but after seeing Carl's face as if he was in pain, she could not bear it and accepted the orders given by Knox. Knox then began to think about the possibility that from now on, it would be a troublesome thing, and what would happen next would be quite surprising. Knox didn't know if his weak horse could get through it all. 3 days later, from the Reinhaver family residence, came the sound of crying coming from a maid who was none other than Rona, who cried for Carl as if he was dead. Seeing that Knox was only surprised, but considering that for the past 3 days, Rona had taken good care of Carl, of course she must be sad. Actually, from the beginning, Knox had known that all of that would happen where Carl would not be able to be saved. Disturbed by Rona's crying, Knox asked her to be quiet because her voice made him unable to focus. Knox tried to convince Rona that he would bring Carl back and make him stand beside him again. But for Rona, this is a strange thing. Knox became upset because Rona didn't believe his words. To prove it, He told Rona to step back from her place because he was going to do something very extraordinary. From inside his suit pocket, he took out a roll of paper and opened it wide. He then placed the paper on the floor and flowed mana onto the paper. Rona was surprised because she thought it was illegal. Because Rona always protested his actions, Nox became annoyed because he couldn't concentrate. He said that if it continued like this, he would kill Carl twice. If all that happened, then it was all because of her. Rona immediately shut her mouth while Nox tried to concentrate on saving Carl. Actually, Nox wasn't so sure about what he was doing, because let alone using mana, he couldn't even find enlightenment for his mana sensitivity genius trait. In the Empire, a person under the age of 15 was forbidden to use mana, except for members of the imperial family. Thanks to this regulation, the children of the imperial family have magic skills that are several times better than students who just learn magic afterwards. Therefore, all he could do at the moment was to flow mana like a waterfall. While doing so, he felt a weak energy under his fingertips, then shortly realized that it was mana. Nox smiled because he felt that what he was doing was very fun. He then used the skill confirmation ticket. At this stage, he could not make any mistakes, because the magic he was going to use this time was black magic. Then a notification appeared that he had obtained the Book of the Killer Necromonicon skill, and the intended target was Carl, where he could become undead. Before continuing at all, a notification appeared to confirm whether Nox wanted to continue all that. In Inner Lunatic, the undead have two characteristics. First, they are creatures that are revived using black magic and dark mana. Then the second, because they are revived, they do not have an ego, but are reborn as a stronger existence. In addition, they will also be very obedient to their owners. But here the problem is that there is only one family that can revive corpses as undead. They are the famous Dark family, the Marbus family. Although Reinhaver was also a famous Dark family, unlike Reinhaver's family who was a Night family. The Marbus family consisted of black mages who generally controlled the undead. Players who are not members of the Marbus family are said to be able to use their skills. There's an option to use disposable skills, where what Nox got from that option was Necromonicon, which was dubbed the Book of Killer. From where Carl was, black-colored hands appeared to take the book. Nox was so exhausted that his mouth was bleeding. Rona became worried, but Nox still told her to be quiet because he could raise Carl a little longer. But unexpectedly, his body was getting weaker, and his mana almost disappeared. Luckily, in the remaining energy he had, Nox managed to revive Carl, and a notification appeared that the skill had been successfully used. Nox couldn't believe that Carl had been reborn as an undead. Carl's eyes are now different, but even so, Nox is grateful that the hard work he did was not in vain. Nox tried to get up and walk towards Carl, whose information and power stat had been upgraded. Nox stroked Carl's head and said that from this moment onwards, he was the master. Not long after she said those words, Rona came to hug Carl and herself while crying. Rona cried hysterically because she thought something bad would happen to the two of them. She also scolded Nox because he used mana as he pleased. Carl, who heard that, looked away, making Rona upset, and asked her to return the carrot she had given him. Seeing the behavior of the two of them, Nox could only smile while massaging his shoulders that hurt from being overwhelmed. After Carl got back on his feet, he had to find the secret piece next. A few days later, at night, Nox walked out of the Reinhaver residence with a shiny stone and a map. Nox was grateful that the path he traveled had not changed much compared to the one in the game. He made the journey to find the second secret piece of the Reinhaver family, where it was a ring-shaped item that he had to get, a key item that could even alleviate the terminally ill trait. Nox continued to walk towards the forest. His heart became uneasy, because during the journey he felt that someone was following him. Before entering the forest in front of him, there was a warning that the forest was a place where children disappeared, so children were strictly prohibited from entering the forest because they could get lost and die. Looking at the sign, Nox muttered to himself that he didn't want to die a second time either. When entering the forest, a notification appeared that he had now entered the forest of missing children. If Nox failed to complete this quest, then Nox would die in the forest. Nox did not care and continued his journey into the forest. The forest of missing children, a forbidden forest in Reinhaver territory due to the darkness and fog that enveloped it. No matter how great a pathfinding ranger was, it was a place where it was difficult to find the way. Just as the name suggests, anyone can become a lost child who gets lost in it. But there is another meaning behind the name. It is known that if the person is an adult who is able to defeat the demonic beast, then that person will not get any artifacts. In addition, there was a system where the difficulty level of demonic beasts would increase dramatically for adults. Nox couldn't remember how many times he had died while trying to find an attack method worthy of his name. With that said, Forest of Missing Children's difficulty level was at least 2.5 stars, and of course with a maximum of 5 stars. For Nox, this was truly the most difficult game. In fact, he tried hard to conquer the forest without knowing what items would come out. But looking at it now, he should be able to get items that match the terminally ill trait. Before continuing his journey, Nox made a torch to illuminate his journey, which might be very long. While holding the torch, a strong wind hit him, making the torch flame sway here and there. According to him, the main key to conquering the forest is to know the movement of the fog that is there, especially the opposite direction of the fog. But before Nox started moving, he asked someone to come out of hiding and show himself. Nox waited for the person, but it seemed that the person did not want to reveal itself, so that Nox could not help but forcibly remove it by cutting the bushes nearby. A few hours earlier, Thalia had confided in Emma about her beauty not working on Nox. She was upset and didn't understand what was wrong with her. Because of Thalia's attitude of always following Nox, Emma begged her to stop doing it all because it would make Nox uncomfortable, and she would also be affected. But Thalia didn't listen to Emma's advice, and told her not to worry too much because she would make sure Emma wouldn't be fired by her family. Although that's not what Emma meant, but she couldn't say anything else, and gave up on advising her. Later that evening, Emma was seen walking to Thalia's room to check on her. On the way, she thought that if it wasn't for Chell, Thalia's sister, Thalia's talent would have been recognized as the next head of the family. Emma wondered why Thalia had become impatient, but it was probably because Thalia felt that she was beneath her sister. Emma finally arrived at Thalia's room and thought that she was asleep, but knowing that Thalia was not in her room, she panicked and assumed that she had gone to see Nox. Sure enough, what Emma thought really happened. It turned out that the person who had been following Nox was Thalia, who was still wearing her nightgown. Nox was surprised and asked why she was in the forest. Before he could explain, Nox pulled Thalia towards him because there was a gray wolf who had been behind her all along. Nox began to understand that the forest was a habitat for gray wolves. Thalia was terrified and regretted not taking Dagger with her. The gray wolf kept watching the two of them and then roared. Soon the gray wolf tried to attack them, but with quick reflexes, Nox managed to protect Thalia. With just one slash, Nox managed to kill the gray wolf. Thalia was amazed by what she saw because she thought that even though there was only one wolf, she couldn't believe Nox could kill it so quickly. With Nox's face covered in blood from the wolf, he asked Thalia again why she was in the forest. At first, Nox thought the person who followed him was his brother. He didn't expect it to be Thalia. Thalia was confused about what to answer because basically she wanted to meet Nox, but at that time she lied by saying that she was just taking a night walk. Nox knew she was lying and threatened to kill her if she didn't tell the truth. Thalia panicked and grabbed Nox's hand and started to tell him the truth. She saw him through the window and followed him. She thought he was going to do some special training, so without thinking she followed him into the forest. Nox could only sigh, and was sure that right now Thalia was overestimating him even beyond his imagination. Besides, he also knew that Thalia actually had no bad feelings towards him at all. Plus, she was a child who didn't know that the world was a dangerous place to the extent that she followed others in the middle of the night. Seeing Thalia's sad face, Nox had no choice but to take her with him, because there was no way he could leave her alone in the forest. Then, before continuing his journey, Nox warned Thalia that what he was doing did not mean he was trying to help her. Nox said he was just trying to solve the problem so that troublesome events would not happen to his family. Hearing Nox's words, Thalia sadly apologized and admitted her mistake. Seeing Thalia like that, Nox was sure that with this, Thalia would not do anything dangerous again. Soon Thalia also thanked him, but her words stopped when she saw in front of them there were so many wolves standing as if they were waiting for their arrival.